it took everything in me just not to go home.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I thought like, I had trained for this meet for a little bit, but I thought maybe this just isn't the sport for me, but it all kind of works out. You know how the powerlifting community is too. Like, we're all just a bunch of meatheads, right?
Mm-hmm.
But 99% of powerlifters out there are some of the nicest people you'd ever meet.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, we all get it. We all get along. And I think in general, we want to see each other succeed also.
Yeah.
Like, you don't see that a lot of times in some of the other sports.
It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. All right, guys, we're back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, my guest is Tyler Butcher. Did I say that right?
Yep.
Before we get into this, I got a couple announcements, I suppose is what you would call those. We just set up a member group on YouTube. So first off, you should subscribe. Most of the people who watch the podcast don't subscribe. They need to do that. My goal is to get it up to like 50%. We're not there yet. So click the subscribe button. What the YouTube membership is going to be is ad-free podcast and extra content. If you're already a crew member, don't worry about it. You already get all this stuff. Or you're going to get this in addition to all the other things that you do get. With our crew, what that is we have a Discord community set up for coaching, AMAs, form checks, all kinds of crap. We've talked about it several times before. There'll probably be an ad that's going to come in sometime during this thing that's going to tell you about it as well. And we also try to put out through the crew a webinar course and an ebook, at least, I want to say monthly, but probably every other month. This past month, we put out a core training one that Tom Shepard did that dealt with the core training, but also breathing and bracing. And the ebook that was put out was My Guide to Dynamic Effort Training. We do make these available on the website independently. So if you want to purchase the course, it's $100, and I believe the ebook is $44.95. Or you could just join the crew for $20 a month and save, a tremendous amount over the period of the year with the courses and everything that's on there. So the join the crew button is in the description. We also have limited edition apparel that helps support the podcast. I'm wearing one of them right now, which is going to be a funnier story when you see Danny's podcast come out later on. I had my AC/DC shirt on and I thought it was this one.
That's awesome.
And I'm like, yeah, we have this new limited edition thing. And they're looking at me like, what's going on? So I made sure this is the one that we got. So they're available on the website now. Head over there, pick it up, support the podcast. So now on with the show. For those that don't know, single ply powerlifter, all-time world record squat, 1152. Unlimited bench of 1010. I think you're single ply. This is all single ply except for that.
Yeah.
Single ply bench is like 8.
Single ply bench was 810.
810. Mm-hmm. And then the deadlift at 804. Yeah. So single ply total of 2634. Believe you're out of Toledo.
Yep, out of Toledo, Ohio. Right. Toledo. Actually, more so Oregon, Ohio. So right outside of Toledo.
We're outside of Toledo.
So a little bit west.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I was there for a long time.
Yeah,
it's funny when you're from Italy.
You went to UT, right?
Yeah, I went to UT.
Yeah.
I went to Bowling Green. I went to UT. I lived in Perrysburg, and I grew up in Findlay. So it's kind of like all around there. But people will still say, hey, I'm from like this town. Yep. You're like, where the hell is that? It's like 15 minutes away from where you grew up.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
And now this all-time world record squat was this year.
It was back in February,
mm-hmm.
right? So it was down in West Virginia. Chris Jivden had a meet down there. Actually, it was the same. It was the year after Jimmy broke his all-time bench record
mm-hmm.
at that same meet the previous year.
Yeah.
Had several folks from our gym. I train out of the Animal House in Toledo, Ohio. Several folks from the gym were down there competing, and I was going for the squat record. So
mm-hmm.
Turned out okay.
Yeah, obviously it turned out okay. And you started training when you were 14. So you're almost on 2 decades.
Yeah.
Or more than 2 decades of training. Mm-hmm. The first meet you were 21?
So my first meet I was I think I was 19 actually.
19?
Yeah. So of course, it was a complete train wreck because I had no idea what I was doing, and
Yeah.
sometimes I still don't know what I'm doing. But actually, at that meet, it was in 2009. I ended up. It was also I've always ever competed single ply also.
Yeah.
So my very first meet, I had a Centurion squat suit and Centurion suit to pull in, and I think it was like it was a single ply Fury Titan bencher
Hmm.
I lifted in. Um, Jumped the rack command on the squat for the first attempt. Didn't get it counted. Took it again, or like actually went up, took it again, dumped it over my head. It was a mess. In fact, like at that very first meet, I went back to the warm up room, and the meet director was nice enough to say, hey, if you want to do a push pull, go ahead, right?
Hmm.
And I was at the like I was like, man, what am I doing here? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I just dumped a squat over my head. Everyone's mad at me. You did like one of the first cardinal sins, and without even having like any experience, I'm like, man, like it took everything in me just not to go home.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? I thought like, I had trained for this meet for a little bit, but I thought maybe this just isn't the sport for me, but it all kind of works out. You know how the powerlifting community is too. Like, we're all just a bunch of meatheads, right?
Hmm.
But 99% of powerlifters out there are some of the nicest people you'd ever meet.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, we all get it. We all get along. I think in general, we want to see each other succeed also.
Yeah.
You don't see that a lot of times in some of the other sports. So it was cool. Like, and then at that very first meet, I met Marty Ross. So Marty Ross, he trains out of Sandusky, Ohio.
So what inspired you to do the first meet? So let's back up a little bit.
Yeah, sorry. Actually, it was a buddy. Like, so I've always trained heavy.
Yeah.
Like I would call myself like the power builder kind of training method or whatever. So I was, I had a 500-pound gym raw bench press. It was a touch and go kind of deal, and a decent squat, decent deadlift, and a couple college buddies just said, hey, let's just pick a meet and do it.
So what started you training then if we go all the way back to
go all the way back, it would have been football.
Okay.
Train for football, kind of like everybody else.
Yeah.
I guess that 14 was kind of when I started taking it more, seriously.
Football seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was at least training for football seriously. I had a weight set at home. It's like almost the same story we all have, right? Like,
yeah.
Like, I got some weights for like a gift or whatever, and I started piecing together these Walmart dumbbells and stuff, and before too long you're benching on a curl bar and there's no more weight on the room and no more room on the bar and stuff. So that's kind of how it started, and my dad was into lifting weights back in college and stuff like that, but like no one in my immediate family like really trained heavy or or like lifted weights, but just something I just enjoyed. And
so you just hooked up with somebody in college that liked to lift heavy too?
Pretty much, yep. And so then, even like in high school training with buddies and stuff, and on the football team and everything, and then that carried into college where I end up I was always a chunky kid. I ended up losing a little bit of weight in college and think I was going to be the next Ronnie Coleman or something, and so just kind of got into training heavy and watching all the Ronnie Coleman YouTube videos, and I was scrolling down, and a guy by the name of Dave Tate, learn how to bench press, was on there. I'm like, oh, check this guy out, right? So, yourself and a lot of the other West Side guys, I would follow their like training logs and just eating it all up, and eventually, in sharing that with my college buddies and stuff, we're like, dude, like it's kind of all we're doing. Why don't we just pick a meet and do it? So that's sort of how it started.
How did you pick that meet? Because we're going back now.
I didn't pick it. Basically, like my other buddy, essentially just said, hey, there's a meet in Springfield, Ohio. It's a couple hours south of us. You want to do it? Oh, sure, okay, why not? Another kind of
what was that, like NASA then?
It was a NASA meet.
Yeah.
Yep. And I lifted a bunch of NASA meets. Not a bunch, probably 6 or 7 or so before doing some other federations. But it was fairly close to us. And that's where I met the the guy that kind of got me more into powerlifting.
Yeah. Now, so the first meet was single ply, right?
Yep.
What prompted you to go single ply at that point in time?
I don't really know, other than like someone gave me an old squat suit.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, this thing hurts a lot, but I can lift more in it. So why not?
Yeah.
You know,
well, I
so-
guess for context, to
Yeah.
help people out here, Raw wasn't a thing yet. At that point, it was just kind of
It was-
starting.
Yeah, it's like Raw with sleeves like didn't exist. You
Yeah.
know, Raw was pretty much just like knee wraps, I guess, if you
Yeah.
wanted to wear knee wraps. And then there was, you know, single ply and multiply. The
Yeah.
multiply was really 2-ply stuff typically. It's like
Yeah.
2-ply canvas stuff.
But even with that, the multiply might have been
Mhm.
at the most 30% of all powerlifting.
If that.
If that.
It wasn't much
yeah,
at
it
all.
wasn't much. And this is what people don't get.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, so
back then, and you know, it's crazy to think it was like pushing 20 years ago. Like single ply powerlifting was powerlifting.
it was.
You know what I mean?
It was.
That's just
Without
what
a doubt,
everyone did,
it
yeah.
was. You know, it's
Yeah.
I remember trying to figure out the demographics of this, and I can
Uh-huh.
come up with like 20,000 total, and that was based upon Powerlifting USA subscriptions. And
Yeah,
because
absolutely. Yeah.
federation presidents would never tell you how many members they had.
Yep.
Um, and then kind of guessing that all around, and the
Uh-huh.
multiplier is about $3,000 out
Yeah.
of 20 to 30 grand.
Absolutely, yeah.
But in each bubble that we live in, you think that's all of it,
It does, yeah.
and it's
And
not.
it also
but-
depends on like if you're the group that you trained with.
exactly.
You know what I mean? Like if if everybody else was wearing,
You'd be
single ply or multiply, you
Yeah.
just lifted with what they did. That's another big thing. And I don't want to jump ahead.
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
stuff, but
yeah.
That's another big thing that I think that today's powerlifting is missing out on. You know what I mean? It's okay to not have a super custom individual training plan.
Oh, you think?
You know what I mean? It's you don't need that.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It's 80% of it is hard work.
Mhm.
You know, getting yourself under the bar every week. Doing stuff that hurts. That's powerlifting. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And there's an important there's a need for coaching and mentoring and everything else. That's extremely important, especially earlier on. But there's an aspect of like just putting the work in. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? That there's not a custom program you're going to come across that's going to change the world for you. There's not a bench shirt you're going to buy that's going to change the world for you or anything. It's just you have to know how to use that stuff and learn it and learn for yourself and understand it. But you got to put the work in too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's a big part. I think that maybe some of some younger lifters today maybe
They might be
missing out on it.
confusing what we would define as work, right?
Yes,
Because it's
100%.
you can go in and work real hard
Absolutely.
once a week,
Yes.
but the
Mhm.
work is also figuring shit out for yourself.
Mhm. Yeah. Like you have to know what works for you.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like everyone's different. We all know this, but there's a certain aspect that you're going to know what works for you better than anybody else.
Yeah, and the only
know
way
what I
you're
mean?
going to figure that out
Exactly.
is by
But-
making mistakes.
But then again, if you have the like-minded people around you,
Yeah.
like the other like we said before with other equip lifters, raw lifters, whatever, the other like-minded people around you, they will learn what works for you. Not only you, but and then you will learn what works for them. You really increase your I guess your training database right? By doing that a lot of people don't have now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So with that first meet, you said you
Yeah.
met with Marty Ross.
Marty Ross.
Marty
Marty
Ross.
Ross. He's from Sandusky, Ohio. He trained with a lot of the original guys like Dave Waddington,
Mhm.
Roger Estep, Steve Wilson. Those dudes. Those were some bad dudes. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
And I remember there was one time. If he hears us, he'll probably crack up. But I remember I was training with Marty mostly, but there was like one day a week I was in Toledo training because of a class schedule or something like that. I lived in Port Clinton,
Mhm.
and just commute every day. And I made a comment about how, the gym that I was training in, it was like above. It was like above this like construction shop, right? It was really kind of like dungy powerlifting thing, which was great. But it was second floor on the summer. It's hot. You know
Oh,
what I mean?
yeah.
So, and I'm a fat guy,
Mhm.
right? So it was real hot. And I made the comment to him one time about how, man, it's like I love the place, love training there once a week, but it's so hot. And he looked at me, dead in the eyes. He's like, Tyler, like air conditioning didn't exist in gyms until like 2000. You know what I mean? Like, what are you complaining about?
Yeah.
Never complain again.
Yeah. It exists now, but
yeah.
But every gym I've ever trained in,
absolutely,
most of them had no air conditioning at all. And it sucked. I mean, there were some times that where you can't even chalk your back. Right? It's like mud. It's like
that was me on Monday. Last Monday.
Exactly. It's like you don't even know what to do. You get the bars. It's just, but it doesn't last long.
Nope.
It's a few weeks or whatever it is.
And there's a certain level of like grit your teeth and get after it. You know what I mean? Like it ain't going to kill you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Go for it. You'll be just fine.
Mm-hmm. And so, how did that relationship unfold for the meets that followed?
The meets that, so like he was great, like, and I really recommend this if you can find, like, if you're in a gym, like especially like a powerlifting gym or whatever, and you see, go talk to the biggest guy there, and he's going to be super nice. 99% of the time he'll be super nice, right? So Marty was training, he was training it was a commercial YMCA, but the basement was like powerlifting. And they used to have all the old like some old APF meets and stuff there. So it was actually pretty well equipped. But anyway, he was great as far as helping me to understand that, like, because I was like a younger college kid, just soaking up everything I could online, right? And I still try to do that. But he was instrumental in allowing me to understand that, like, complexity isn't always better.
Mm-hmm.
There's absolutely benefits to keeping your mind in your CNS, like challenge, but also guessing and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But there's an aspect of hard work. You know what I mean? So we trained very simply as far as like how we put our training together. It was a few weeks of volume, and then they hit a big single or double. We just did that over and over and over, and it worked well for me at the time, especially because I was still growing. I think some people, if they're say they're I don't know. 242 at the time, right? And they're at that 19, 20, 21 where you're going to gain weight, you're going to get bigger. That volume works wonders, to like build that base.
So wait, what you're talking about sounds like it's more blocked out.
Kind of.
All right.
Yeah,
so
kind
of. What would be volume?
5s.
All right. So like week 1, 5, week 2, 5, 3, single.
Something like that. Yeah. Super. It's just block training. Right?
Yeah.
Super simple. We would throw in something different every once in a while just to have some fun. You know what I mean? Whatever, different bar, different whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was just simple.
Well, it's interesting because if you go back through the guys that you were speaking about that he trained with, you're dealing with more of a linear approach.
100%.
For a while, then they just started just kind of maxing out all the time. But and that I could spend 10 minutes describing that because that's not as easy as or as simple as what I'm making it out to be. Mm-hmm. You probably know, and you may do it a lot yourself, that there's long stretches where you are just kind of going out and maxing out the singles or triples every single week. But that it's not really periodized, but it's also not, it's based on how you feel.
100%.
Like this single today should feel like not that hard.
100%. Yeah.
Then the next week it's going to be, it's going to feel hard.
Yeah.
And, but people will hear just max out all the time on singles and think that it's a gut buster.
Correct. Yeah. And like, that's kind of how I approach my meet prep. Like the last, 6 to 8 weeks, I'm doing singles every other week typically.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm doing either like a second attempt kind of weight, opener kind of weight, second attempt kind of weight. Rarely would I ever like go for like a third attempt style over 100% a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
When I was younger, I did.
Yeah.
It's a little different now, obviously.
Yeah.
It's kind of same way for like meet, like at a meet, I'm typically not really taking my third attempt squat. I'm gonna get after it on my second to get what I want, and I'm gonna save it for the deadlift.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it does mimic that sort of block kind of training, and then you throw in your singles, towards the end.
Did that become the base of how your training philosophy was going to unfold moving forward?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
And like, honestly, like I wish I had some kind of like magic answer, but there really isn't. Like that's pretty much what I've done for the past 20 years. Now the difference being today, where like I'm like too beat up to take 1100 every other week. That's kind of stupid. But those like I do program around 5s and 3s using like the SSB bars and stuff like that, or Hatfields, just to save the hips and back, and then I'm back after it again. But there's some kind of volume going on every week in something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Now, we skipped real quick from like the first few weeks to that one.
Yeah.
So in that in-between time, you're at an age to where you can pretty much recover from anything. You can do stupid shit and get away with it.
Yeah.
You can't do that now.
No.
Which is, it's an interesting kind of dilemma that you run into as you work up through the ranks, because what got you there is exactly what you don't need to do once 100%. You're there.
100%.
But I think you have to go through all that other stuff while you can recover from it. So on those initial years to where the strength was just coming, basically, no matter what you did, it just kept coming. What were some of the takeaways that you had from that? And then some of the things that if you could go back, you would tell yourself, and not that it would get you hurt. It's just like, might be a waste of time.
Sure. Yep. So like, honestly, during those times, especially, I like my lifts increased by perfecting or becoming better at just lifting, like technique. You know what I mean? Like there was a lot of technique that I did not have, and it's, and as the numbers grew, hey, you know what? Like you try to muscle this, you're probably going to get hurt. That's you start getting tweaks and stuff like that, and then you kind of step back and see like, hey, there's probably more benefit to me like backing down the weight for a couple weeks here and there and working on that that technique, learning how to properly use it. Even lifting single ply, I would still like train in single ply briefs every week because I could still practice that sitting back technique. Even how you wrap, you know what I mean? Just one-on-one fundamental stuff. Like that was probably the biggest improvement I think I was able to make, just throughout those earlier years. But again, it came back to just taking the time to do it and learn it and practice it, and like talking to some of the guys I've like trained with back in the day, that were helping me. They would see something in my technique and help me fix it and tweak it, and now I have to do that 10,000 more times. I'll have it perfect.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So that was probably honestly one of the biggest focuses to increase my squat, bench, deadlift, and then training with, again, going back to the whole group sort of like mentality, training with those guys to see that and understand like, hey, you didn't do something here that you need to work on, or vice versa. And it wasn't anything negative at all. People get all offended if you critique their squat, even if they're asking you to critique it. You know what I mean?
You're looking for it.
Take it and learn from it.
Yeah.
What was the one story with Captain Kirk? Like one of the guys he trained with, it was his job to tell him what he screwed up. I think they're at Worlds over in somewhere overseas or whatever, and he said he hit I think it was 1,003 or something. Hit it and just smoked his beautiful squat. He knew it was a beautiful squat, and his training partner came up and said, "Hey, yeah, your shoes all tight, all weird, and off to the side. Just find something I screwed up.
Yeah,
make it better.
Well, that's should be what you're doing. In my opinion, that should be because no lift is ever perfect.
No, absolutely not.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're always looking for something.
For sure.
It becomes more detailed the better a lifter gets.
100%. Yep.
And for me, that gets a little weird because when it gets to that level, then you stop looking at the real simple things, like is the grip even, is the bar in the back, and because you're so concerned with all this other stuff. And reinforcing it's another thing. And when somebody moves up those ranks, it's when people will say technique, they just in their brain they're thinking squat up, squat down, all this stuff.
It's a lot more.
Where when we're talking about how can you effectively do this to be able to apply the greatest force to the bar and have no leakage anywhere. Right.
I always try to simplify it down to like, how can you do everything as efficiently and deliberate as possible? You know what I mean?
And know you're doing it. Right. So that's where, the gear is different. I don't want to say it kind of helps with this because there still is tactile feedback if it's a raw lifter.
Sure.
But as you're sitting down, hell, you even know before that. Before you even start your squat, if the tension in your hips is too much or not enough, and then you have to, a lot of this you're now doing subconsciously. You have to shift, but as you're squatting down, the tension, you're either looking for it in the hamstrings, glutes, quads, or it's a distribution of all that. If it's not in the right place, everything's in slow motion.
It is.
So in your brain,
it slows down.
You may be like, okay, this is not right. You're pushing your knees out. You're pushing back. And all these decisions are being made as you're doing this repetition.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's technique.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what people don't.
Like the squat or the bench, whatever. It's not a movement. It's a multiple series of events.
Yes.
So you need to, like, if you skip any one of those events, you might as well put the bar back.
And that's a great way to explain that. And those events are during the repetition, the eccentric and concentric, because people will see that and think first event, sit on the bench, second event, you'll lie back.
Yeah.
We get that. I mean, that's all part of that too.
100%. Yeah.
But there's a whole lot of other things that happen in there. And that's where those crews with experience,
they're invaluable,
can help because they're going to see, it's, we had a lifter this weekend. It was Amber. It was F8 unlimited. Bench shirt. Right. And bar looks a little weird on the last one. It's a heavy weight. So it's somewhere, is it the wrist, is it this? And it's like, no, the fucking bar is oscillating. So this all, and as I told her, we can sit here and we can look at this and we can think that's that. But when you look at everything in its whole, you can fix that. But if that plate's still oscillating just a little bit, when you pull that out and there's 685 or whatever on there, it's going to flip everything 100%. Back, and that's having those multiple eyes being able to look.
And you think of like how talented of a lifter Amber is. Like, even she can use outside eyes and things like that. Like there's no point in which, like, I don't care about anybody else's opinion like that. Like you should be trying to learn something new every single time you're under the bar, and
then think through the solutions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
In this case, it's like, okay, we're using fat rubber plates and shit too. So the first thing is we can go 3-man handout. We can control the oscillation. There's all that, and then it's like, oh, maybe we could just use the kilo plates, and instead of being this much weight, it's
a little more manageable.
It's not going to whip that bar. It's not going to oscillate.
Because
there's a difference between whipping and oscillating, 100%. And you'll know because you're squatting,
you're going to feel
1,100 pounds. And that was something when Blaine Sumner was out here that I never even thought about because
and
he's got a 45-pound bar.
45-pound bar, and he's walking it out. And Blaine Sumner is one of the most efficient squatters in history. That's plain and simple. You watch how he sets everything up. You watch how he sits back. He comes up, it's just very, very efficient. Those sorts of things, like he didn't learn that overnight. It took a lot of time for him to understand that, and I'm sure he had people in his life helping him out to be able to see that, or even going back and watching video. It's not just getting into the bar and just YOLO lifting it.
If I remember, I think he was one that would film from multiple angles on every rep.
Smart guy.
And,
absolutely.
So that's an absence of a crew. Then you have different eyes to be able to kind of look through all that.
That was a situation he was in where he had to do that. He found a way to make it work. You know what I mean? So,
what were some of the earlier mistakes that you made?
Honestly, some of the, like, this might sound kind of weird, but like, I guess allowing the like anxiety of the lift to diminish my ability to slow down and think about every single part that I needed to approve. Like, say if you're in a single ply poly bench shirt and you're benching PR kind of weight, you get down to like an inch close to touch and you're like, dude, get this lift over with. You know what I mean? And so So what do you do when you try to get this lift over with? You adjust your technique to touch quicker. Well, okay, fine, you touched quicker, but then you touch in the wrong location. And now you're sitting with 800 pounds like this.
Mm-hmm.
Good luck. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. I think that, instead of just allowing all of the events to happen and just slowing my mind down, getting it to work, that was probably a part of something that I probably did incorrectly for quite a while. The other thing too was, if there was a certain, like say, conventional versus sumo pulling or whatever, so you could use this for anything. If there's if you plateau somewhere, it's just not working right. It's okay to try something else for a while.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like there's always I know a lot of times it's in good fun, the whole sumo versus conventional like dilemma, right? But hey, you know what? Maybe if you've pulled sumo for 10 years, whatever, and man, something's not right, and hips are always hurting all the time, weight's not going up, pull conventional for a while. You're not going to lose anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like you won't forget how to deadlift, and your conventional deadlift muscles won't go away. Try something different.
Yeah.
Like don't get stuck on a specific movement that just isn't working. It's okay if it doesn't work. You can change that.
Well, where the hang up is with that, and I wonder if you ran into that. I know I did on certain things.
Yeah.
You don't want to do that one because that's a 3-plate lift compared to the 5-plate lift of the other one.
Yeah. But the weird thing, and you'll probably understand this too, the weird thing is that, so I pulled sumo for 7 or 8 years, right? Like earlier on. And I'm like, it just wasn't moving the way I wanted to move. So I'm like, fine, I'll just pull conventional. It was terrible for the first little while, but I pulled a PR number like less than a year later. So was it worth it? Absolutely. And
yeah.
It didn't feel right those first few weeks, but just give it some time. Like you don't have to be perfect at it right away. This whole thing is practice still.
What weight did you do your first meet at?
I was so this is kind of a funny story. So
yeah,
when we first talked about doing a meet, I'm like 250. I'll go 242. So
every fucking lifter wants to do that. Even though everybody through the course of the whole sport's always said never lose weight for your first meet.
But here's the thing though, is we had like 5 months to prep for it. Lots of time, right? So I started traditional powerlifting, right?
Yeah.
So what happens when you do that? Your weight goes up.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So I'm like, okay, fine, I'll lift 275. I'll just be a light 275. No big deal. I go to the meet and I weigh in at 278.
Oh, God.
So I had to lift 3 weights.
No shit.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So I lifted, it didn't matter. It's your first meet. Who cares what you weigh in?
Yeah.
I could have weighed 400 pounds, whatever. But, so I did 2 or 3 meets at 308, and then it's been super ever since.
All right. So from 270, basically 275 to 350.
350, yeah.
350.
I think the heaviest I ever weighed was like 358 or 360.
Going back to the deadlift, because I believe the first meet I ever did, I was like 181 or 190. I mean, it was in high school.
Yeah.
I changed my I changed from sumo to conventional many times because as my weight went up, my leverages changed.
Absolutely.
And maybe they didn't structurally change, but more mass makes that a different type of thing. And it would go back and forth. And then towards the end, the benefit that I found from that, because I trained both, here and there. Yeah. I mean, West Side's conjugate, so it could be sumo, whatever the fuck it's going to be. But it helped because if I had to switch in a meet, say I jack my back on a squat, then I can sumo pull and it's not going to wreck my. Yeah, and I did the same thing with my bench as well, to where I could tuck or have feet out in front. It makes you
more of a versatile lifter.
Yeah, because you don't know. I started that with my bench because hamstring cramps are one issue that one time, and I don't care how hardcore you are. When you're tucked underneath there and your hamstring is cramping like a bitch, it's you can pull it off, but you're not going to bench the best.
And you can turn the pain off, but it's distracting.
Exactly.
You need to be focused.
And it would push to the side all the time.
100%. Too. Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm like, if I just put my feet out, I don't have to worry about that. Or I mean, I'm going back so far. Not all bench heights were always the same either.
Yep.
And that ran into an issue to where if I was trying to keep my feet closer and it's a 14-inch freaking pad, compared to 17, I had to have some recourse with that, which powerlifting's evolved, guys. I should just say that, because a lot of people like to bitch about things all the time. Imagine going to a meet, because you go to the meet, you be in the warm-up room, everything feels cool. Then you go to your first attempt and you sit down and it feels like you just sat 3 inches lower.
Completely different. Yeah.
You're like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you know, my ass is going to come. Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So from that regard, it's a good thing, because
sure.
hopefully they should. I'm pausing because I know this doesn't happen. They should have the same stuff in the warm-up room that's going to be on the platform.
In a perfect world.
In a perfect world,
Yeah.
but at least it's closer than what it used to be.
Yeah.
As you were coming up through, in a couple things that we've already said that I kind of want to go back to, that how somebody comes in usually is how they stay in, right? So and what we see online is not real. So like the battle between like the multiply and the raw never really happens in gyms ever, or in meets or gatherings or anything like that. That's just some bullshit that's online. And when if somebody comes in and they come in through say an IPF gym or a USAPL gym, there's a pretty good chance they're going to stay that way throughout their whole career. Same thing if it's multiply or whatever it's going to be. And this is where it gets weird, for lack of a better word, is somebody comes in that way, they don't really know any other way, you know, because they're just doing meets, they're in their own little bubble or whatever it's going to be. Then 5 years later, they're seeing all this online bashing of the way that they actually train. And meanwhile, they're thinking, well, I didn't even know this other shit existed.
They could be still getting stronger, right?
And I'm not going to leave where I am, because it's a good environment, it's a good crew and all that. But I think people just forget. You know, their tribalism's kind of based upon where they came in. But the tribalism is really kind of stupid too for a niche sport to begin with.
It's
you know, because at
the end of the day, it's we're all lifting weights, man.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like there's, you know, I've lifted with pretty much anybody, right? And some of the like most I guess motivating lifters I lift with are some of the IPF USAPL guys. Like, you know, especially some of the lighter weight guys were like, oh, man, that dude just pulled like 50 pounds less than I outweigh him by 200 pounds. You know what I mean? Like, that's motivating. Just whatever preconceived notions you have, just get over it.
So how have you navigated the single ply environment over the last 10 years, maybe?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, it's definitely, there is not near, I feel like it's coming back a little bit, but it definitely went down quite a bit as far as like,
well, outside of IPF, but I guess this is going to coincide. Because the IPF was the last to embrace raw. Or one of the last. I don't want to speak definitively, but one of the last. But when they did that, then I don't know what happened to their single ply numbers, but I'm going to guess they didn't. It may not have gone down, but it certainly didn't grow.
There was almost like a paradigm shift.
You know,
I mean, more towards like a lot of the single ply guys, or maybe even the lifters who would have gone into single ply found themselves more on the, you know, sleeve side or whatever. And like, I understand that. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, that's what they're coming into.
They're coming into that. Also, you know, as a college kid, like having to buy $200, $300 worth of equipment every meet is kind of sucked. You know what I mean? Like it's expensive, right? So, you know, as a college kid without any money to begin with, like all you need is a belt and some sleeves. Okay, cool. You know what I mean? Like, and ultimately that's, you know, that's good for the sport to have an avenue for lifters to do that. So there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever.
Yeah, that brings up a funny story that even growing up around the whole sport my entire life, and it's, you know, when I started, it was USPF. Right. The APF had just kind of broke off. So when you say Wilson and all those guys, I
for sure.
I don't want to say I competed with them. I was in the same meets they were in. They were in, and it wasn't even flights at that time. It was like a round robin, right? So it's like I lifted, then they like lifted 3 hours later in the same flight.
They may have to lift 2 or 3 times in a row. Like,
yes. You know, I mean, when you're getting to Waddington squat, some of the ones that Dimmel and them had to do, and this is just some history for people that don't know, they only had 3 minutes between attempts. You know, and they were lifting if you were in the 600 or 700 pound range, you know, it's starting to, in that age, at that point in time, it would start to slim down a little bit.
Yeah.
So sometimes we would have people that would be on our team or we trained with that would basically just put in fake numbers. So they were never going to lift, but they put the number in to be able to give you that break. Well, you don't get the fake number break over 900 some pounds. You know, so
you can't jump from 7 to 1,000.
So they hit their first attempt. They got 3 minutes. You know, then, and that's before they had to have, it's not even that because they got a wrap.
I know. Yeah.
You know, so there's wraps and straps and shit like that too. So if they did get all 3 lifts, that happened in under 15 minutes.
Yeah. Like that's, you know, those old school guys, there's some bad dudes. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like you hear people complaining that, oh my, you know, the deadlift bar on the platform isn't the deadlift bar, use the gym. Try doing your entire, like all of your heavy squats in a matter of like 10 or 12 minutes. Like that's pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And and I'm surprised you didn't kind of come into that because a lot of those guys migrated, especially Sandusky, Cleveland type area, to basically one heavy day on Saturday, which was all 3 lifts.
That was a lot of that too, yeah.
And then accessories and stuff during the week. And I was
on the very tail end of that, basically. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because that was insane. Because when I was in college, I made a few trips to Black's Health World. Yeah. You know, and that's how they trained. And it's like a fucking meet. And it helped because every meet I'd ever go to, like they were always there. Yeah. And I competed more frequently back then than later on. And I could never understand like how these guys always ready, you know, for meets. I didn't, because I'm like 12 weeks I need to do a meet. And then I realized, well, fuck, they're doing meets every weekend. This is just their training day.
If you get invited to a big meet next week, like I'm ready for battle. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's there's an aspect of that that's so cool, I think. You know? It's you know, it's just a different mentality, I think. Yeah. Like a lot of us had.
Yes. I mean? Yes. Louis was always, we should be able to be ready within 4 to 5 weeks. Right. Now there's other circumstances involved, right? You know, anabolics are an issue, but either way, the lift just would have been 5-10% under, whatever, you know, of what that was going to be, but physically ready, you know, to be able to do that.
Pretty much contest ready just about all the time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes. And that was weird for me because I came from more linear and block type of stuff where after a meet, sometimes I wouldn't even train for a month at all.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. You know, it's just, you're beat up, whatever, and then be bodybuilding shit and then kind of back. So it took a lot longer just to kind of get back into meet shape. Yeah. You know, for that, then it's just like,
like especially in your case of like you were doing bodybuilding shows, right? Yeah. So like, you know, you're cutting for how long and then doing, like it takes a long time to recover from.
Yeah. You know? Yeah. I sucked at that. So it wasn't that much of a distraction because I probably trained more like a power lifter during that time period. And a lot of the strength that I acquired during a lot of those things didn't transfer.
I understand.
And that's, and one thing I kind of figured out, but haven't really figured out because there was one point where I always competed in the 42s and I really never had to cut that much for that. Then I went through 2 years of just straight bodybuilding and weight went way up. So I put on maybe 15 pounds of lean body mass and all my lifts rep wise were way stronger until I went to do the next meet. Yeah. And that's and I've known Louis since I was a teenager, not as well, but as a mentor type of thing. And him coming up to me and just like rimming me, you know, ripping my ass apart in the warm-up room. Like, how in the hell can you go from 242 with an 1,800 pound total or 19, whatever it was, you know, to 275 with 1,850 and all these lifts looked hard. Yeah. And you're bigger. And I'm like, I don't fucking know. You know, I can bench 405 for 10, but I only did a 440 for a single. I'm like, I don't know what the fuck happened. It just didn't transfer over. And I think it's, you know, there's an explosive comp.
100%.
You know, and I was explosive lifter, and there's when you're doing that bodybuilding stuff, you're not trying to lift it with the same type of intent.
Yeah.
And it's a completely different game. But as going back to that, as you were going through and building up through there, you know, you have, so there's the base of how you're going to compete, which is kind of solidified as you come in, right?
Yeah.
But then there's also the way that you train, which kind of gets solidified through there as well. And I don't want to say smarter, but for lack of a better word, the smarter ones are going to use whatever that base is that was working and then start to adapt things and pull things from that. You know, if it's linear, conjugate, block, whatever it is, they're going to do that. Where, as you said a little bit earlier, where people will make a mistake, assuming the base is solid, right? That's a big assumption.
A lot of people don't even get to that point.
But but assuming the base is solid, then they start jumping around.
Yeah.
You know, and that's doing themselves a disservice because they got 3 years of kind of figuring out a little bit of what's going on.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then they'll go to something completely different and not know anything that's going on.
You're starting over.
Essentially, they are. You know, where if they just kind of integrate. So as you were going through all this, you know, it's easy to a point, then it gets hard.
Yep.
Right. So when it started to get hard, what were some of the things that you started to manipulate to get through those
some of the
earlier on?
Yeah. So some of the things like was the use of additional like training aids, I guess, in my career, whether it was like using something like a band of some sort or blocks or doing some more like box squats and things like that. Because a lot of the stuff I really didn't, you know, I didn't do a lot of the bands and chains and stuff like that. Like, not that there was anything wrong, I just didn't do them a whole lot. So adding those later on definitely did make a bigger difference. Also too, just there's an aspect too, like even if you've been, you know, training for years or whatever, you know, I wanted to also be have it as big of a base as I could possibly get. You know what I mean? So that base doesn't necessarily stop growing after 5 years. You know what I mean? Like keep doing some of those things that you did before to grow larger, and then dial in all of the equipment and things like that. You know what I mean?
Well, how do you define base?
So that's kind of a good question.
Well, there would be two ways I could see. There's a structural base, you know, muscle mass, and then there's you know, the movement base.
Typically, okay, so mostly muscle mass, right? Like if you're a powerlifter and especially if you're trying to be a 275 or heavier powerlifter and you don't look like an ape, you're probably not doing it right. You know what I mean? Like get as big as possible. Quit worrying about like you said earlier. Quit worrying about the scale so much. Stop cutting for meats. Like, get as big as possible. Mass moves mass, right? Get as massive as possible. Yeah, sure. You're not gonna sleep as good. Your clothes don't fit. You probably won't look as good. But for those 2 hours in the gym, you'll feel amazing. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's okay, right? It's just part of it, right? Like, you know, there's, you know, I see a lot of really talented lifters that are terrified to go up a weight class because they might get chubby. Bro, you're not going to get chubby. You know what I mean? Like, you're just going to look that much cooler. Sorry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you know, and I understand. I'm not here to say, like, you know, that you need to be unhealthy to be a powerlifter. I'm not here to say that at all. Like, but be the biggest version of you that you can be. You know what I mean? It's going to help.
Well, there's very few people that are going to be 6'2", and competitive at 198.
Exactly, right?
You know, so I mean, you just look across the sport, and you can kind of see it's more a height game than a weight game,
for sure. Yes,
there's definitely, because I can see the comments already. What about John Hack?
I know.
There's definitely going to always be outliers to all that,
of course.
For most, you know, the general advice I always had was, you know, keep going up until you can't make progress, then go down a class.
Sure.
You know, or you're just a complete tub of shit, and then you know you're probably not training hard enough.
And like at that point too, like I don't, you know, that's not. Like, just being fat doesn't mean you have a base. You know what I mean? Like, you got some muscle there too, right? Like, I want to look like I lift weights.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What's the point of spending all this time in the gym if you don't look like you lift weights, right? Like, kind of basic, but there's some truth to that,
Mhm.
you know. And again, there's 100% people out there that are able to move monstrous amounts of weight with you know, like in the lower weight classes and whatnot. And you know, there's some that's totally cool too, but that works for them. You know what I mean? For the majority of the population, um, getting bigger will make you stronger.
Yeah.
You know,
And it will work for a while
sure.
and for years. I
Mhm.
mean, actually, it will probably work for more years
Hmm.
than they're going to even compete.
More than likely.
But,
Yeah.
you know, I've known a lot of lifters that fight
Mhm.
those weight classes
Hmm.
and they don't want to go up because world records are being broke.
I understand
And they're
that
the one
too.
breaking those,
Yeah,
right?
I
Like,
understand
say
that
if you
too.
were in the 308s, like
Yeah.
you don't want to do that.
Understand.
But there's going to come a point to where
Mhm.
every year let's just say you put on 2 pounds of muscle
Yeah.
every year
Mhm.
and they're cutting down to 165. And the
Mhm.
first cut was easy.
Yeah.
You know, 5 years later, that cut's no longer the same cut
For
anymore.
sure. Yeah,
It's a
absolutely.
30-pound cut. And now
Yeah.
they're not breaking world records
Yeah.
anymore
Mhm.
because they're destroying themselves just
Mhm.
trying to make weight.
And that also lends to the having success in the sport in general means you need to compete for a long time.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And it's tough on your body, you know, cutting all that weight and gaining it all back, and lifting heavy loads at a lighter weight class than you probably should be at. It's easy to get hurt that way.
Hmm.
You know, um, and again, there's a million different people out there, and there are some freaks that come out of the woodwork and they break all kinds of world records, which that's awesome. It's good for the sport. It's fun to
Hmm.
watch. But the majority of people who hold, you know, like records, they've done it for a long time. You know what I mean? And
Well, yeah, I
they've
mean,
tried to stay as injury free as possible.
the time thing
Hmm.
comes up with every guest I've ever had, you know, on the podcast.
Yeah.
And, you know, the comprehension of time, it's hard to explain to a lot of people.
Hmm.
But if there was one good thing that kind of came out of the pandemic,
Uh-huh.
is I can use that as a reference point and an anchor
Yeah.
and say, man, remember when we went through the pandemic and all the gyms were shut down? They're like, yeah, like, man, that doesn't seem like that long ago, right? It's like we're 6 months shy of 5 years.
That's insane, isn't it?
Right. So when
Insane.
we say a long time and it may
Yeah.
take you 5 years to get, you know, to
Mhm.
the point where you have a good enough base to compete at a national level,
Yeah.
think of that. So that's what I'll do is I'll anchor that.
That's perfect. It
Yeah,
makes-
then
it
it's
makes a
like,
lot of
oh shit,
sense.
that's not that. It's time only looks long looking forward. It never looks long looking
No,
backwards.
Absolutely not. No.
You know, and that puts some perspective,
It
but
does.
but you still got to work hard, right?
Mhm.
Because I think what happens in people's brains with that, and we are all the same way.
Sure.
Like, it's to sit here and act like I didn't want to get as strong as I possibly could in 2 weeks would be a fucking lie.
Of course. Yeah.
You know, it's,
Yeah.
you know, everybody's like, no, I don't want to make gains too fast. that would be bad. But as we move through your journey, there is a time to where you'll get to where if you're peaking for a meet
Mhm.
in your brain, you may start thinking, you know what, I'm probably 3 weeks ahead of where I need to be right
Yes.
now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're logically just laying
Mhm.
it all out. It's like I need to
Mhm.
dial back.
Yeah.
That's
A lot of that
so
goes on
much
feel,
later,
right?
Yeah,
You know, like I've had I've had meets where I've totally missed it. You know what I mean? Like you're a couple weeks out and you're like, man, I like something's not right. You know, like it do not feel good. Tendons are all beat up and stuff. Like, you know, well shoot, like a couple years ago, when I squatted 1140 something single ply. That was a full power meet, obviously. And the night before, I remember thinking, man, my like pec tendons are messed up. You know, bench is going to suck tomorrow.
Mhm.
Well, I tore a pec. You know, it's just you know,
Mhm.
and it takes a little bit of wherewithal to be able to dial that back. And I'm still trying to figure that out because I'm not good at it.
Mhm.
You know, so it takes some logical thinking
Yeah.
on like how to do that properly. You know.
What were some of the other through that midpoint?
Mhm.
Some of the other changes that you've had to make to regulate the training.
Yeah.
And let's stay before a 900-pound squat happened.
Yeah. Okay.
Because after a 900-pound squat, I think things change significantly.
It does change. Yeah. I would say it does. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say some of the things, I don't know, they didn't change a ton, but I did try to be more conscious as far as like how many times a week I was training, like the intensity level in which like those training sessions took place. Like it's probably not a good idea to have a max effort style bench press on Friday, and then on Tuesday on my light day be doing like reps with 500 with like a slingshot or something or whatever. Like I had to learn how to dial that stuff back. Like it's okay if I only bench press once a week. You know what I mean? I don't have to bench twice a week. Things like that. Just because I could tell that I was some of it had to do with age, and other things had to do with just the weights, but I wasn't recovering as quickly. So there were I had to actually make my light days actual light days, and to allow myself to be successful on my heavy days. There was a lot of that kind of going on, and just a general more like a more awareness, I guess, of what my body was telling me, as far as and even things like trying to rehab better, or as Bev, my wife, she's a physical therapist, she calls it prehab, right? Take those days and do prehab, prevent yourself from getting hurt. Do the things you need to do, whether it's additional stretching or it's like active recovery kind of stuff. Like start being a little smarter about those things, because I think a lot of guys, when we all start training, you're again 13, 14, 15 years old, and you're like invincible through like 20, or even 25. And it just things start, like I found it easier to maintain my body weight and to get stronger, but it was more risky, right? I had tweaks and things like that I have to work around. And in training with Marty, that helped a lot too. So Marty is, sorry if I messed your age up, buddy. I think he's 61 now. But so when we were training together, he told me, hey, when you hit 30, things are going to change. I'm like, whatever. Like they're not. Like I'm an animal. I'll always be an animal. Like you can't hurt me, right? Well, he was right. You know what I mean? Like things did change, especially when I turned 30. Like I needed to be a lot more conscious of like some of those prehab. Turns out you have to stretch before you lift sometimes. You know what I mean? I don't think I did that till I was like 28. You know what I mean? That's probably a dumb move, right? I could have prevented some other tweaks and things like that too. But just the awareness has to go up, as you get older and as your career progresses. And also too, you have to think like, this isn't my 9-to-5 job, right? I don't want to get hurt and miss work. Just be aware of things, be aware of life.
Yeah. Now, was it always that way? You didn't want to get hurt because of work, or did that shift over time?
I think it shifted over time.
Yeah. Because I didn't give a fuck for a long time.
There was a long time that I didn't either. You know what I mean? But I would say after 30 is when I really started to just be more conscious of it. And you know what? My training didn't become less intense. I was just smarter about it. You know what I mean? I still moved more weight and bigger weights than I did before. I was just smarter about it. And there's an aspect of just using your head sometimes that we didn't really always do when we were younger. You know what I mean? So that's definitely something that I think I learned throughout those middle years for sure.
Yeah. I want to circle back to your example of sometimes you have to stretch, sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
Elaborate on that in today's context.
Yeah. So there is my wife, the physical therapist, may disagree to some extent, and I'm sure other folks online are probably going to rip me apart on this too. But yeah, sure, stretching is important and stuff, but there are certain movements that you want to be a little tighter in, right? Like if I'm going to get ready for a huge squat, am I going to just stretch my hips all out and be all loosey goosey before it? Absolutely not. Will I do some minor stretching for my quads and hamstrings and things like that? For sure. Stretch the tendons, stretch things like that. I'm not going to sit there in a butterfly position and throw my feet over my head, or I can't do that anyway. But I'm not going to do that, right? There's a certain amount of tightness that is good for a powerlifter. And it may make things. It's funny because like Jimmy and I talked about this a while ago. Like just, being rotated and everything else. Like, it may make you walk like an ape and try to grab the deadlift bar and it feels all weird and stuff, but like there's a certain amount of that that's probably necessary. You know what I mean? So just, stretching and preparing yourself to go to battle with that squat bar or whatever it is. Just doing it in a smart way.
Now, if it's a squat,
Mm-hmm.
are you, because there's going to be a certain degree that you're going to know when you walk into the gym, something's too tight or not too tight, just on how you feel.
Yep.
For me personally, if it's a squat day, I may, before I do anything else, I may, do 2 or 3 reps of a box squat just to see.
For sure. Yeah.
Then from that, it's like hips are good.
Yep.
The hamstrings are not.
Yeah.
So are you doing like a free squat or anything like that to kind of gauge or better gauge where it's tight and what's not?
Typically I don't, but I think I probably should.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's probably a good idea. Usually, and also, kind of going back to like, some gyms being air conditioned, some not. And like my warm up in the winter is going to be different than my warm up in the summer, for sure. But what I've done quite a bit is like, if I take that plate or whatever, I have my 2 or 3 main things I warm up every time. My quads, hams, a little bit of back. I do a little bit of abs beforehand because it helps open my back up a little bit. But if I jump under the bar before I can plate, start and warm up, and something doesn't feel right, it's okay to stop.
Mm-hmm.
Stop, fix it, stretch something else out, go back to it. Fix the issue before it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you think about some of the injuries that we've had in the past, like, if I, could I have not tore a pec if I would have just did 5 minutes of stretching on my pec tendons beforehand? That would have been worth it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But, sometimes we get real aggressive with just getting into the gym and like going to war. You know what I mean? There's a certain attitude that you have to have for sure, but just be smart.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I think you can also be too loose.
100%.
Where
if
I use my lower back as an example, like I'll fall back on squat day. I could walk in my lower back super tight.
Yeah.
And, most of the advice is never foam roll your lower back, right? Well, if it's too tight, I just want to roll it so it's tight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not so it's loose.
Agreed.
For that. So there's no rules here.
No.
There's just what degree of stiffness do you need to have, for that.
Yep.
And if it's too tight, there's sometimes you're probably never going to resolve it. You just need to say screw it and go.
You need to be flexible.
Yeah. And so once you then got to squatting heavier weights that create systemic fatigue.
Sure.
Right? Because you're going to get to a point, and every lifter is probably going to get to the same point.
Sure.
It's just for the bigger lifters, it seems to be around that 900
yeah.
pound squat, because now that's taking more out of you systemically than what the 700 would.
For sure. Yeah.
What changes have you had to make as that has moved from there to say 1100, where one of the commonalities that I'll see with the heavier squatters is the frequency drops a lot. Sometimes it's just heavy once a month, or every other week. So how has that had to?
So if I'm not prepping for a meet necessarily, I will squat heavy typically once a month. And that's with suit straps up. You know what I mean? I may go heavier on throw on a pair of single ply briefs and go heavier, or go straps down or whatever. But where I'm getting after it, and I usually consider heavy anything from an opener to a second attempt typically. So anywhere from 1050 to 1150 would be heavy. That happens about once a month. And then as I'm leading up to a meet, say, 7 weeks out or so, it becomes every other week. Typically that's just to get the head ready, right? You get get your CNS ready to feel it, right? But that's sort of what changed for me as far as frequency goes. Another big thing is I started incorporating a lot of Hatfield squats, and a big reason I had to do that, or felt like it was necessary to do that, is because it allowed me to still train my train my legs heavy, but I could unload the back a little bit. So heavy squats week in, week out, heavy deadlifts, like really tears the back up. So I'm able to unload my lower back a little bit, but still feel something heavy on my shoulders. You know what I mean?
All right. So with a Hatfield squat, are you speaking holding the bar in front?
So it's like a safety bar.
Yeah.
And then typically what I do is I'll use like a combo rack or whatever.
So you're holding the rack.
Yeah, a couple fingers on the rack itself.
Okay.
And that has seemed to help me be able to, again, like feel a heavy load, but be able to like unload my back at the same time. So I've added that over the past, I would say 3 years or so. That's been pretty big for me. And because one thing that I find is if I just go into a really heavy week after not really feeling anything heavy on my shoulders for a while, I may not perform as well just because the whole shock of it. You know what I mean? Like I like feeling. Plus, I like feeling something heavy on my shoulders. Right? I like to squat. Like I've done it for a long time, but it's fun. So I want to do something challenging. So being more conscious and aware of those types of lifts that allows me to still get after it, but then preserve or like save my back and other more sensitive parts of my body for a big lift on meet day.
So how do you lay your training out now?
So typically now it's like they're usually like I'm usually looking at things in 12-week blocks.
Yes.
So the first I would say like 6 to 8 weeks are going to be more of that, of the like sets of like rep sets of 5 volume kind of training. And then the last 6 weeks I'm going back with those 6 weeks, still like a single, like once or twice during that whole 6 to 8 weeks. The last 4 to 5 weeks is would be like a heavy single, something like a Hatfield, and that's like a second attempt. And then like something closer to like a third attempt, Hatfield, opener, meet.
Okay.
So something kind of like that, typically.
And does your bench follow that same pattern?
Pretty close.
And deadlift as well?
Deadlift and bench both follow that. It may not be exact, but it's actually pretty close. Jumping into some of the unlimited bench stuff, I've had a lot of fun doing. I feel like that I can bench in a shirt, in a banded shirt more often than I can a poly shirt. A poly shirt just beats you up more. So I'm in a shirt more when I'm getting ready for something that's like more like unlimited. But it does follow the same sort of guidelines. So the other thing too is like being, I've been doing some of the unlimited stuff over the past couple of years. Those heavier loads have also changed my upper body a little bit as far as like how my chest and back are built, meaning like I'm a little wider, so it makes the deadlift a little more challenging sometimes. So there are other things that have taken place that I really wouldn't have even considered happening. I still weigh about the same, but it changes your physique a little bit.
Is your touch point different?
It is. It's a little lower.
So how do you go about managing that?
Yeah. So I've had to change my grip up quite a bit on the bench press. I don't recommend this, and take this with a grain of salt because I'm not the best bench presser out there. But I use a lot of open grip stuff. That's so I can tuck a lot harder. And a lot of people say you probably shouldn't do that, and I agree, you probably shouldn't. But it's how I touch, and so that's how I do it.
Yeah, I think I made a video many years ago because a D1 football player decapitated himself, and everybody was like, "Never use a false grip," and it's like it kind of pissed me off a little bit because you just need to know what the hell you're doing.
Absolutely. 100%.
Most people have no idea what they're doing.
Yes.
There's a lot of all-time world records set with a false grip, and these guys are not dropping the shit on them.
No.
There's a way to go about doing it, and there's a way to not go about doing it.
And at the same time, I've used I've dumped benches with a full grip.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But the false grip is going to allow a little bit different angle. You can tuck more, touch lower. There's a lot of things that can come from that. But I understand what you're saying. I'm going to put the same disclaimer out. If you don't know what you're doing, don't do it, or get around somebody.
Be smart about it.
Yeah. I could actually have a tighter grip false than I could not.
I agree.
Especially when my hands are bigger and fatter and,
the way you wrap your wrists also makes a big difference on that too. If you want to do it, practice it in a cage or something. Be safe about it. Be smart about it. But it is an option that I found was beneficial for me. Most people probably wouldn't use it or need it. But for me, it worked.
So how do you manage training both throughout a annual plan, or do you not?
You mean
because the band shirt versus the other shirt, because they're two different,
very different,
very different.
Yeah. So if I'm doing if I'm prepping for like a meet where I need to bench a poly, that whole poly prep or that whole prep will be in a poly shirt.
All right. So there's no band stuff on at all.
I don't. Yeah. If I use a band stuff, I use like a Widowmaker. Yeah. F8 Widowmaker, which I use those every week, depending on regardless of whatever I'm doing as far as warm ups go and stuff. But yeah, I usually don't cross those a whole lot. There may be, say we're benching one night and I don't have a number I have to, I might throw it on to have some fun, but that's the extent of it.
Now, are you using, if it's single ply shirt day, are you using the Widowmaker to bridge the gap between where your raw ends and the shirt would begin?
Absolutely.
So you're using that instead of boards per se?
Typically, yeah. And so I will do say I have I'm going 800 or whatever in a single ply poly. My warm up will be 1, 2, 3, 4 plates. I'll throw on a single ply Widowmaker, go 5 and 6, and then throw the shirt on. I might take 6 again in the shirt, 7, 8. Yeah, and then if there's other sets on top of that or whatever, but yeah, I do use that to bridge the gap for sure.
Then if you're training for a meet that uses that shirt, this brings in some interesting training dynamics, right?
Absolutely.
Because now the gap is even bigger between the raw and what the competitive lift is going to be.
It is, yeah.
To where you have to use something or you're not going to be able to expose yourself to high enough loads.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. So be able to do that. So how do you go about that?
So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll use instead of a single ply figure, I'll use a 2-ply figure 8. You know what I mean? So something that's going to groove more like the shirt will. It has a lot of tension across your chest. I'll use something like that typically. Whereas I might do say 1 plate, 2 plate, 3 plate, a single ply Widowmaker for say 4 or 5, double ply Widowmaker for 6, throw the shirt on at 7. I'm this high off my chest still. 8, 9, I'm touching, 1,000, I'm ready to go.
Well, this can be tricky here because if your day's planned to be a heavy triple, and you're not working on percentages on field, but just for conversation's sake, let's say it's going to be, a 94% triple. You can use double Widowmakers and have that be super easy, or you can just use one Widowmaker and have it actually be work.
Yeah.
So how do you determine which one to use based upon the training cycle? Because you got to keep your ego out of it and you still got to get the work in.
Yeah.
And I think this is where a lot of people make mistakes in band shirt training, by the way.
I agree.
Instead of actually grinding through and doing the work they're supposed to do, they just put another insert in.
Yeah.
And then, hey, that was an easy triple.
Yeah. So what I try to do is I try to be honest with myself, and I have maxes for everything, right? What's my 1 ply? And I even have a 1 ply F8 shirt also. What's my 1 ply poly max? What's my 1 ply F8 shirt max? What's my multiply max? And then also what can I do approximately with my 1 and 2 ply Widowmakers, right? So if my training for the day is and it might be say something like almost like an overload, 2 board kind of deal. It's obviously going to be in the 2 ply. If I have a number where I need to do a heavy triple full touch kind of deal, it's going to be in the 1 ply. But I'm going to pick that number that percentage based on my 1 ply. Yeah. Widowmaker max. You got to be honest with yourself too. You know what I mean? You came here to do work, so put the work in. But yeah, there's a lot of I'm either going to inflate my numbers to look cool around all the other kids I'm with or whatever you want to do, or you be honest with yourself and build that base and build that strength over time.
And
Then
how does your raw strength factor into all this as well? Because you can't let that fall on all the lifts.
So a lot of times what I'll do is on my light bench day, and again, this goes back to like if everything's feeling good and I'm not beat up or whatever, I'll try to do my light bench day mostly raw. You know what I mean? So and that may mean more like volume stuff, right? So I might work up to 4 or 5 for a few sets of 5 raw or whatever. I might want to do like a higher volume, like set of 10 or whatever. But I'm going to try to do that stuff all raw. Again, because you're right, there is a raw aspect that people forget about sometimes. Equiplifters forget about that. I think when they do that, it stagnates their equip progress. Right?
Yeah,
it is still important.
Well, I would say it's their base. And even if you're just, doing it as what you're doing, then 315 should feel easy. But if it's your light day and 315 doesn't feel so easy, then you're going to start processing, am I fatigued from X, Y, or Z? It's none of those things. Oh shit. I need to start pushing my warm-ups before, a little bit harder than jumping into something too fast.
Yeah, agreed.
Because I've seen that inverse relationship even before the benchers. I started to see it a lot.
Yeah.
Like the carryover starts to go up, raw benches starts to go down, and that's fine. As long as the main thing's going up. Until the main thing starts dropping, then you look and you see that the discrepancy became a way bigger percentage. And for most, it sucks because they got to go back and maybe go through just a pure raw phase, which they don't want to do. But
that was something that I kind of had to do. Like I never really got away from doing some sort of assisted, even if it's not equipped, like, F8, whatever, assisted heavy bench day. But there was a point in time a couple of years ago where I had to really, really look at what my warm-ups and what my light bench day looked like. Because I did notice that, I did notice where my raw bench press just, A, I didn't even know what it was because I wasn't doing it. And B, when I did find out that that doesn't feel the way it should, I should probably get better at this. You find the weakness and fix it. Right. So I absolutely had to go through that. And there's an aspect of it too, especially in the bench press for me, where, if you're training super, super heavy in a shirt or whatever all the time, like you're not going to touch every single week, right? So when's the last time that you went from here to here, right? Like if you haven't trained from here to here over the past 2 months, that's probably a bad thing. And training is in like more than one rep, right? So there's a lot of that too. It's something that we all need to be aware of.
So moving into your squat, then how do you? I understand how it's laid out, over the 12 weeks, but how do you introduce the gear? For instance, some will go briefs. Old school, you're going to do what wraps first, briefs first, and then wraps and briefs. You're not doing that. I get that. But on the lighter days, is it just briefs or is it brief straps or just suit down?
Typically just briefs or briefs and wraps. I'll throw on a pair of single probably briefs to do my rep work, but I really don't. I don't do a lot of raw squatting. There was a time up until fairly recently where I would have a week of just raw squatting, but I've kind of gotten away from that because, again, going back to beating up the hips and everything else, if I'm pulling heavy and squatting heavy in the same week and then I throw a raw squat weekend on top of it, it does take a little bit of a toll. And I want to be, obviously, like as an equipped lifter, I want to be 100% when it comes to hitting those equipped weeks, right? I don't want to waste, not waste, but I don't want to, I guess, use up some of that energy and some of the in my hips maybe for the following week when I have a big one coming up. So and also when I'm doing the rep work and things like that with briefs, I'm usually wearing a more of a larger size brief. It's not something crazy tight. And then as far as wraps go, if I'm squatting briefs and wraps, I may not necessarily have to wrap the tightest, or I wrap just for my last set or something like that. But there's definitely an in between. I almost like compare that to my my Widowmaker.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the same deal. You know what I mean?
Well, with how you squat, how much do you? I know this is a stupid amateur question, but how much do you really think the wraps are helping at all? Because you are back. You know, it's I could almost make the argument they're probably not helping at all.
They're not helping a whole lot. I think honestly, it's a bigger head thing.
Yeah.
You know, really. I'm used to having a tight wrap on my knee, and I think that's how it's supposed to feel. So if it's not there, I'm probably going to be in my head a little bit. But you're sitting so far back. You're right. You're not really using a whole lot. You know.
Now, how frequently then are the straps up? Is that
straps were typically like, you know, same kind of deal, once a month.
Yeah.
And then when I get down to say 6 weeks out, it's every other week. You know what I mean? So it's pretty simple as far as like, because I don't do a lot of like specialty stuff necessarily, but it's straps up once a month and then straps up every other week from 6 weeks on in.
All right. Now with the single ply gear today, do you have to replace that after each meet? I mean, because if we're going old school, right? Because one of the things I didn't, when I used to sell gear that I didn't realize at first is I couldn't understand why, because it was most of what we were selling was multiply, and we weren't selling much single ply, and I really didn't give a shit because, you know, my demographic was multiply. It's the people that I knew, and I didn't understand why all the other competitors didn't give a shit about multiply. I'm like, look, it's more expensive. You know, I'm going to make more selling the whole thing. But what I didn't realize back then is, you know, a multiply suit, as long as they don't change weight, can last 10 years.
Absolutely.
The single ply you had for one meet, then that became the training suit for the next meet. And you do the math, it costs way more.
Depending on how tight you wear it. And I wear, especially for a squat suit, I wear a size, and I've always worn off the shelf stuff. My squat suit size is typically 2 to 3 sizes smaller than what's recommended, right? So after that training cycle, it's beat up. You know what I mean? A lot of times it'll become my like deadlift suit or something, or a training suit, like you said. So especially earlier on too, like you know, and I'm with Anderson now. They've been just fantastic. They're just a good group of people. They help me out with equipment stuff, but I probably shouldn't say this, but even if I wasn't sponsored from them, I'd still be buying from them. But like, I was buying a suit and a shirt every meet, right? So there's suit, shirt, hotel, gas. There's $1,000 to do a meet for a piece of paper, you know. But it's fun. It's what we do. You know, and it comes back to being a hobby. Like, this isn't my job; it's a hobby, and I love it. But it's a labor of love, right? So.
Wait, if I'm to look at your training week, and I assume it's a training week, right? So it's not like a 10-day training cycle or some weird thing that's hard for people to understand. How do your days lay out?
So Monday squat night, right? Me and the few folks that train with always squat Monday night. Tuesdays is going to be more of like a shoulder day, upper body rehab, prehab kind of day, like I was talking about. Typically some light raw bench presses, lots of like shoulder work. Thursdays is deadlift day. Friday is old school bench press night, right? So what we do is we all go to the gym, we order pizza, play some old school rap, and bench press, right? So it's kind of the overall like layout of it, right? It's simple, not complicated. Obviously I have each week I need certain numbers I'm trying to hit, certain moves I'm trying to hit, but that's pretty straightforward. 4-day split, right?
And then how do the supplements? So on the Monday, what are the supplemental exercises, and how do you choose those?
Pretty simple on that too. And like I do something for my upper back every day. So I do some sort of pull down and row. I do abs, quads, hamstrings. That's pretty much
right. Now with the pull down and row, are you trying to divide that so it's not 2 pull downs in a row, like a pull down on Monday, a row on Tuesday? A lot of times what I'll do is I'll do like a like say 3 or 4 sets of pull downs and 2 or 3 sets of a cable rows. I do it all together. You know what I mean? And it's nothing crazy, you know. It's just, but it's Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. I'm doing that every single day. I also do, and then the last exercise typically is like last 2 exercises is like rear delts and shrugs. So rear delts just for shoulder health. Being an equipped bench presser, I think sometimes like
We neglect our rear delts and our delts in general, and so I try to maintain that. The shrugs are pointless. I do them because when I started dating my wife, she said she liked traps, so
Yeah.
I do traps every day.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty simple.
So it's the same accessories for pretty much all 4 days.
The bench days.
Yeah.
The only difference would be some tricep work, front delt, side delt. I'll do my rear delts again. I'll do some light cable crossovers or some sort of like pec accessory, just mostly just to like stretch the pec tendons out.
Yeah.
And then abs. I do abs every day as well.
All right. And now, is there a heavy second movement that falls before those, or is it just the main movement and then straight into those?
Typically, it's the main movement and then straight into those.
Yeah.
Only time I will do something a little bit different is like on deadlift day, where I have like sometimes I'll do my heavy deadlift movement and then I'll do like a secondary deadlift movement, like maybe we're doing like deficits or something like that, and then it goes right into the accessory work.
Yeah, because the bar's already loaded.
It's already there.
It's there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Overall, it's kind of the same stuff a lot of guys have been doing since the 70s. And there's nothing really complicated about it.
I remember a lot of my old deadlift days, and maybe this came from the Ed Cohn deadlift program or whatever the hell it was, but it was like deadlifts first, and then stiff legs.
Yep.
Because the weight's already loaded to the heaviest, so then you pull a plate, you do the stiff legs, so then after those are done, you pull another plate, you do your barbell rows.
Yep.
And then you never leave the same place.
It's efficient.
It's efficient. Yeah. You're stripping the weight anyhow.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Yeah.
You know, and it was simple and kind of played through that whole thing. Now, if that first movement gasses you, and the way I like to explain this is if you're a lot of video games have a little life meter, you know what I'm saying?
Takes all your life meter.
Yeah. Right. So you want to go into the heavy day with it full.
Yeah.
Right. That's the goal. That's where you were saying earlier, you don't want these these lighter days to impact that heavier day, because now you're not going to go in at 100. Reel at 90, right? You're never gonna, but you're not gonna go in at night. You don't want to go in at 70 because that's stupid.
Yeah.
You know, you want to be there. Then after that first lift, some of that it's going to be taken away, right? Yeah. So if 60% is taken away, you can probably still do everything that you're talking about. What if 80% got taken away on that? Do you drop those other things, or do you just reduce the load that you're going to use?
Tips, I'll just reduce the load.
Yeah.
I still like to do the movement because there's something about like, there's something about the movement that is still like therapeutic as far as like the whole stretch of it goes, right? Like squat, bench, deadlift, you don't stretch during the movement a whole lot, right? As far as from like a therapeutic standpoint. So I still like to do my cable rows and my pull downs and things like that, because it's important to stretch my lats and stretch my bicep tendons, all that kind of stuff. I'll just reduce the load typically,
So the intent will change from heavy, to a greater range of motion, trying to work on a stretch.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Because it's the one commonality, there's more than one, but no top lifter trains the same.
No.
We all know
Impossible,
that.
Yeah.
Funny, right? Because everybody's looking for the perfect program, right?
Yeah,
right.
Exactly, yeah.
And this is, genetically inclined and genetically not inclined.
Sure.
None of them all train the same. So there is no perfect program. But what they all do is find ways to auto-regulate their training.
You absolutely have to.
Yes. And that's common amongst everybody.
Yes.
And that's kind of the one example you just gave there. If that's down, the intent of that's going to change. Yes. Your warm-ups are going to change as well, which you kind of touched on a little bit.
Yep.
So you have no exact, I'd be surprised if you even write your warm-ups down, right? There's the top weight. Yeah. You kind of have a guide.
There's the guide.
There's the guide, which is how many times have you had to retake 135 before you go to 225.
Exactly, yeah. And there have been things too where I've also over the last couple of years tried to take another look at especially in the squat, what my warm-ups look like to how I can make them more efficient, right? I may front load the warm-ups with like 1 plate, 2 plate, 3 plate, or whatever. But that will allow me to get the briefs on and skip. Maybe I have a 200-pound jump twice.
Yeah.
Or you know what I mean? But by then I'm warmed up enough, but I don't need to waste that energy on that
495,
whatever. Yeah. On the 5 plates and the 7 plates, like, you know what I mean? So there's definitely an aspect of like, how can I make this as efficient as possible? You want the actual lift to be as efficient as possible. Why shouldn't the warm-ups be as well? So that there's an aspect of that too.
With the work sets, how many work sets are there? Because when you said the heavy full gear type of thing, so is it just here's the number you want to hit and that's it, or is it I need to hit 3 singles?
So typically it is that is the number that I want to hit. But in doing so, I may have 2 additional sets that are still warm-ups that are straps up and still like, pretty difficult. You know what I mean? So I hesitate to say that it's only 1 working set. But it's a number that I need to hit, but I may have 2 additional warm-ups, and those warm-ups may be something that I'm not doing in the warm-up room at the meet, just to get a little more load on that. You know what I mean?
So you're building that work capacity through those. And I assume they're also kind of letting you know if that top set's even going to be there on that day.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you climb under it and you hit it, it doesn't feel right. It's slow. It's even if it's from an equipment standpoint, maybe the equipment's a little bit different. Maybe you lost weight or whatever. You're going to know pretty quickly if that's going to be there or not. 9 times out of 10, if you're not like right up against the meet, it's going to make more sense to do something else. You know what I mean?
Well, that was going to be my following question. If it's not there, what would that something else be?
So something else might be like, so say even if I may try to do, say have a straps up, let's call it 1100 for the day, okay? And I do a warm up of say 9, right, with straps up, and it's like, man, that's not right. Like I know it's not right. I may decide to go, okay, well, this week we're going to go straps down 1,000. You know what I mean? Back it down a little bit. Still allow me to get the work in. The load might not be quite as high as like it was planned to be, but the workload is still the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So there's a B plan.
Absolutely. Always has to be a B plan.
Yeah, I know that's one of those quotes that drive me fucking crazy. Is there's no B plan? I'm like, you're an idiot.
Yeah. Well, you're going to get hurt.
There's always a B plan.
There has to be.
And especially in the strength culture, right? Because sometimes they won't go to college. They won't increase their education because fuck it, this is what I'm doing. There's no B plan. I'm going to be the best at that. I'm like, well, what do you do when you're not training?
100%. Yeah. So, well, also too, I've seen that too, where like, okay, this is my life, okay, and I get it. It's all of our lives. We love powerlifting, right? But if that's all that you're doing, and you're not trying to improve yourself on like intellectual level, whatever, why? Right. Maybe you're powerlifting, but you're also coaching and sharing knowledge and stuff. That's awesome. Right. But if you're powerlifting and then you just go home and sit and do nothing else, well, like I'm going to beat you on meet day because I'm used to working 10 hours or 12 hours, whatever, going to the gym, hitting the same numbers you are, probably more, and then going home and probably work on a side project I have going on at home. Like, you know what I mean? Like you're not going to be competition for me on that day. It's just plain and simple. I work more than you do,
Well, the counter to that would be the person that's saying, I'm going to be more rested.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's necessarily true.
I don't think it is. From my own standpoint, I don't think it is. There are, you look at some of the, so say some of the most successful lifters out there, right? So they also work a lot too. You know what I mean? Like they're even if they're in the powerlifting industry, they're traveling around a lot and they're doing seminars and they're coaching and they're working a lot, right? They're not just powerlifting, right? Like their whole life is work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And a lot of them, they're not sleeping 14 hours a day. It's just,
well, I don't know. How can you? Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I guess I wasn't blessed with that freaking gene, but
everything hurts too bad.
Well, yeah.
It's important than that.
Oh, exactly. And you're going to wake up pissed, so you can't breathe because you're choking. I mean, there's a lot of things that are going on during this time that you're supposed to be sleeping. So with the hobby thing, or trying to figure out the hobby thing, which is weird because powerlifting essentially is just a hobby. So when did you figure out there needs to be other things?
I would say it was after college for sure. You have to have something else in life too. because unfortunately we won't be able to do this forever, just the way it is, right? You need to be able to have other hobbies and other interests, whether for me, I love working on race cars and stuff, right? So I build race cars and hot rods and crap like that. Like that's what I enjoy doing.
Fit in them?
No, barely. It's actually more. It's probably more amusing watching me get out of them. But that's like it's okay to do other things. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to take away from your training if you're interested in something else. That's fine. It makes you more honestly, it makes you a more interesting person to be around. You know what I mean? Just to to be able to carry a conversation on. And when we're no longer able to compete, a lot of times there's you have to have something else to do, right? And I was talking to my family yesterday after we got back from church. We were eating dinner or whatever, and I was like, my mom was saying something about about powerlifting or whatever. I'm like, honestly, if I haven't been in a gym to just like lift or train for health, I don't know if I could do that. Like I would have to figure out something like maybe it's bodybuilding, maybe it's something. I don't have to be good at it, but maybe it's just something like that, like some way to allow me to compete in something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just
for now, I'd say don't even think about it.
I'm not really worried about it right now. But
yeah. But it's for people in that situation. I'm one of those.
Sure.
It's tough because it's training for just like health sucks.
Yeah,
it's
not fun.
It's terrible. It's not fun at all.
Yeah.
But if you can anchor it, to something, like, here's some stupid thing that I want to do.
Yeah, or even just like circle a date on a calendar. This is what I want to do by this date. Something like that.
And it could be, I just find exercises I don't even know if I'm good at or not.
Yeah.
Right. So then I have no reference point. It's like the worst thing I could do is like, I want to train and max out on a floor press, but I know what all my best floor presses ever were.
Yeah.
And I'm going to lose. I'm going to be mad. I'm going to be upset. I'm going to be disappointed. I'm going to be depressed.
Yeah.
Like, no. All right. Well, what if it's just all chain and like a dime on each side? How many chain? I don't fucking know what my best on that is.
Figure it out though, right?
Yeah. So I'll do it and have nobody else do it to make it look like it's really as bad as what it really is. and
that's awesome.
So there's you got to find those anchors to be able to put in there, because it's when you spend decades doing that, you walk into the gym and it's just like, what the fuck, maybe the machines, but how fun is that?
I'm not doing that.
It's and even if you did, you're going to end up seeing how if you can do the whole thing.
So it's probably do something stupid. But you have to, you got to figure out a way to, again, I'm not saying like, I can't powerlift anymore, so I'm going to be the next Mr. Olympia. No. Like find a way to allow you to compete with yourself. Like that's what I think I'm going to have to really do, or really focus on whenever this is over with.
And it's easy. It's the bodybuilding thing. I would personally advise people not to do, even a lot of bodybuilders. I hate that I said that because what you're doing is I did that right after, as well. And powerlifting does take time. Sure. It takes more time than people think. We're downplaying it quite a bit. It takes more time than what people think, especially we put in the recovery, the restoration, food, and trying to get the rest and all the other kind of stuff. Bodybuilding takes even more time. And you're going into it with the same type of discipline. Yeah. So you're like, I'm going to do this because it's going to be better for my life. It's going to be easier, but then it takes 3 times as much time. And the discipline's even all expanded and all this other kind of stuff. And then it's like, oh shit, but it's a challenge, which is that anchor.
It's a way. It's still a way to challenge yourself. It's something to work for, right? Like if I were to do a show down years later, I'm going to be the worst bodybuilder in history. But it'd be something to do. Well,
it's a way to get the weight off too.
Yeah, for sure.
Because there's not a lot of 350-pound 70-year-olds walking around.
Probably don't need this heavy for decades, right?
Yeah, but while it's there, you want to seize everything you can out of it.
Absolutely,
that's damn sure for as long as you possibly can too.
For sure.
So I'm not one of those people. I go, no, man, you seize that shit
Yeah.
until you can't fucking do it anymore. You know,
I would ride as long as you can, man.
whatever price that you have to pay is worth it in the end. I've paid a lot, you know, so it's in every one of them. I can sit there and say it was worth it,
Yeah.
you know, for that.
Absolutely.
With powerlifting culture side, we kind of touched on it a little bit, but being around for 2 decades, how have you seen that change?
There's a lot less camaraderie, I think. When I got into powerlifting, the best thing you could do was to find a crew that thought that you know, thinks like you, trains like you, you know, wants the same things that you do, and you all you made each other stronger. You know what I mean? And you know, there was like, we all did the same kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Like, we didn't go in with, oh, I need to do an RPE whatever with this bar on this on this platform. I got to do it over here. Otherwise, you know, no. You all climbed under the same bar and we started adding weight, you know, and we all got stronger. And then to what we talked about earlier too, like, we were able to see what each other was lacking, right? If I was screwing something up, or if I couldn't figure something out, somebody else was there to help evaluate it for me, right? A lot of guys now, they will come into the gym, they'll put their gym back on, they'll throw the headphones on, and they'll train in the corner by themselves, and that's it. You know what I mean? Like, there's a level of and I know this doesn't apply to everybody, but there's a level of training that you're missing out on, of knowledge that you're missing out on by just isolating yourself, you know. And I get it, some people have to do that, some people, you know, whatever, but for the majority of folks, if you have a really solid crew that wants to all get stronger and get better, that's the way to do it, right?
It is, and it's I've thought through this one quite a bit, right? Because I wonder, you know, if I was 15 now, you know, when I started and started in today's world, would I have been sort of seeking out a crew, or would my introverted self, as I was back then, be the person with the headphones just doing my own thing? Probably the person with the headphones just doing my own thing. So I can't blame the people that are doing it, but the difference is that I can kind of relate this to, from, I suppose, a social level, is, you know, if I wanted to power lift, there's, you know, in my hometown, there's one place. That was it. You know, and then when I went to college, there was maybe one, maybe two places, right? So at the very most, you know, and then even when I was, during my time at Westside, there was one place, you know, maybe like a Worlds that had a little small crew, where you had to just figure it out with the people that were there, because what are you going to do? You know, that's what you got. Now in every town, there's multiple places. There's more options, for sure, you know, so with the more options creates that opportunity to not have to.
More individualism.
Right? And I came in the same way you did, in a crew, you know, so I didn't really know any other way. So after that, it was, okay, this is going to sound egotistical, but I'm stronger than everybody in this crew now. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to be in a different city. I need to find a crew that's stronger than me. You know, and then you just, you find those stronger crews to be able to move to. For
sure, absolutely,
because it raises you. And I realized it's part of it sucks, right? There's no doubt about
you're not
that.
the strong guy anymore.
And you're not. You know, part of it sucks, but the other part is you get better really fast. Right? Because your perception of weight is completely different. You know, my perception going in, when I was 14, and, you know, I wanted to bench 405 because that's what everybody else was doing. You know, so it's all these other weights in between were just warm-ups.
It didn't matter.
And that was my perception.
For sure.
You know, if somebody else's perception that may train in, you know, a school gym or football program or whatever it's going to be, you know, 315, you know, they're on a fucking record board. They're getting a certificate and shit.
That's the big one.
That's the big one. It's like 3 plates, man. You know, and that matters.
It does.
You know, you get around people that are way strong. I mean, if I'm training with you and you're squatting 1,100 fucking pounds, you know, 700 doesn't seem like a big deal.
Well, like, but also too, like, it makes, like, even adding people to a crew later on, even after you've had experience, makes a big deal. So, guy by the name of Josh Spurgeon, he's like from Toledo area, and we like train together. But he didn't start training with us till a couple of years ago before he moved down south. And he's a great deadlifter. He's a strongman competitor now, pulling like 1,000 pounds. Great deadlifter. That made me a better deadlifter. I wasn't a 1,000-pound deadlifter, but it made me a better deadlifter even after I've already competed for 20 years, because I'm like, geez, man, this dude's killing me, right? I need to keep up. Like, so it's also never too late if you're more of an individual style lifter, which is okay, but you want to get into a crew and you're halfway through your career, it's not too late either. Find those guys that want the extra guy to come in and train. Like, it's hard to get good solid crews now for whatever reason. It just
I would say if somebody wants to get their squat to move fast, the best thing they can do is get in a crew of people that are good squatters, and they will be shocked at what's going to happen.
And if everybody else is a lot stronger than you, they're not going to care that you're not to their level yet. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if I'm squatting with a guy who has, say, like a 600-pound squat, I'm going to be probably more excited for him when he squats 7 or 8 than he is. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, that's awesome. That's going to motivate me. You know?
And that may happen within 6 months.
I know. That's the cool thing, right?
Yes, and because you've seen it many times.
And then you see those guys hitting PRs. And you're like, well, I better start kicking it in gear and get some of my own going. You know?
Yes. Well, if you're a better lifter, there's a lot you can learn by helping others.
I agree. Yeah.
Because it's reinforcing a lot of the things. Yeah. A lot of the details. Yeah. That may suffer, on you. The other thing it does, and I'd be interested to see if this is in your case, is if you're in an environment and you end up being the top lifter, a lot of times people don't want to tell you that there's technical breakdowns or there's things that are happening.
For sure, yeah.
You're way stronger. You know more just because you're way stronger.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? But if they see you helping somebody else, with all that makes it more open for them to say, more likely to say, hey, it looks like your knees are caving in, or something, like your pick was off.
If I'm pulling 800, but the 220 guy's pulling 650, he's a better puller than I am. Plain and simple, he's a better deadlifter than I am. I could learn something from him. Our leverages may be a lot different, of course, but I can probably learn something from him. I mean, it's just plain and simple.
Well, there's other things that can happen in that crew dynamic too, where you may have one person that just starts doing something a little bit differently than everybody else. And then a lot of times it doesn't work for shit, but sometimes it works really well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Then that becomes part of everything else.
And going back to what you said about really focusing on like the fundamental stuff, it was only a couple of years ago that I realized that I wasn't bracing the way that I should have. I had already squatted, 1,100. But I realized in like helping out some other folks, and we were all training together, like, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that the exact way that I'm explaining it. Like, I got away from it somehow. Yeah. And so I really focused on doing that. And then guess what happened? My squat went up.
So how were you explaining it? Then how did you go back to doing that?
Again, also going back to like making every individual part of the lifting event. Yeah. I was almost skipping that event. I was just maybe subconsciously doing it to an extent, obviously, but I wasn't being deliberate, like that. Like, you brace, you brace, push out real hard, as hard as you can, pick the weight. I wasn't skipping the brace, but I was subconsciously just passing over it. You know what I mean? I wasn't being really deliberate about it. Because I wasn't being deliberate, I wasn't as tight. I wasn't bracing as hard as I needed to be. Yeah. And it made a big difference. It plain and simple, it did.
So with your, do you walk your squats out? I mean, it's going to be based on where you compete,
it's
right?
It's based on the meet. Typically, I don't. Okay. As far as the bigger ones, especially because I've been competing a lot in the APF and the IPA and some of those federations. But if I'm doing a USPF meet or whatever, I would do the entire prep walked out pretty much.
Okay. Because it's what I'm wondering is if you went from walking out, because there's like a medium brace, pick, step, then set up, brace, go. Yeah. And then you start going right into picks, right? And then it's easy to forget that with the weight and the gear that you're using, if you're not going to be able to do what you want to do under the bar. Your hips have to be back, pull your air, then slide under. And I can see how that could get skipped.
I'm sure that had a big part of that for sure.
Yeah.
Because I was doing more of the training out of a mono.
Yeah.
And things like that. So it was a, it's like you said, it wasn't, not that I was skipping it, but I was just passing over, right? I was bracing, but not bracing, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's different.
It is.
It's a lot different. Sure. And a lot of times I have to correct that, on lifters that we'll have here too, because their knees are out, their hips are under, they're where they need to be under the bar. It's like, dude, how the fuck do you think you're going to be able to pull any air? You know what I'm saying? You're already wedged underneath this. Anyway. Your rib cage is smashed. Yeah. Kick your hips back. Yeah. Pull your air. Then it's like, oh my God, that pick was so easy. Better, but it gets lost. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And it's sometimes it's the simple things that end up getting.
Yeah. And like for me figuring out that I wasn't doing that the way I should have, it was the same thing where, okay, do it. And then now do it 10,000 more times the exact same way. Like I had to really think about doing that the same way every time until it started to feel more natural. And I was like deliberately doing it every time. It's literally the simplest part of the squat. But I just wasn't doing it the way that I should have. Yeah. I mean, and at the same time, you need to be honest with yourself too. Like, I don't know everything. I'm screwing stuff up. Let's fix it.
So break your squat down, a max effort squat, a meat squat, to the micro level of everything that you do as soon as you walk up to the bar.
Yeah. Okay. So again, you're walk up to the bar. Typically for me, I like to get my hands set, right? Some people kind of move their hands around. I like to just lock them in. I use typically I use like either 2 or 3 fingers on the very end, just to get a little more rotation underneath it. It's always, chest right up to the bar. And that's just a small cue for me to confirm that the bar height is where it needs to be. So I kind of, you feel that back, and then scooping under the bar. Typically for me also, when I'm pulling my shoulders back, I lock each individual kind of trap into the same.
Well, before you scoop under the bar, where are your feet?
Sorry, feet are where they're set, right? Yeah, so feet are set, right? So chest and feet is that the exact same thing? Yeah. Because your feet have to be at where they need to be in order for you to understand for sure if the bar is where it's at, right? Yep. So scooping underneath the bar. I like to set each individual trap almost like separately, just to really focus on locking it in. And there's a certain feel there as well, I think, that just confirms that the bar is where it needs to be and it feels even. And then kind of both rotate underneath, elbows in, big belly. And then this is where I was kind of skipping over it. Just press and brace against that belt as hard as you can. I was kind of like rolling underneath the bar and then just squeezing and standing up, right? I wasn't just locking that whole thing in, getting that diaphragm, getting your belly filled and push out against the belt. And then for me, it's okay. You pick it, arms come out if you're doing a mono, whatever. You're leading back, right? So I'm trying to rotate the hips as hard as I can. I'm a really wide squatter, so I'm trying to keep my hips as open and sitting back as hard as I can, but my chest is still out. I like to have a neutral head position. And then as an equip lifter, you would understand this. There's a pressure level that you grow accustomed to on where you need to be as far as depth goes. It's hard to feel depth, but it's hard to feel depth as far as the physicality of where your quads and hamstrings are at, but there's a pressure that you grow accustomed to. Typically it's like right when everything gets real black. And then and obviously it's just as far as the execution of the squat, it's pretty much similar for everybody else, obviously, but driving your head back, again, still keeping a neutral position, keeping that chest out. There was a point in time where I also kind of struggled a little bit with the bar wanting to kind of roll a little bit on my heavier squats. And I think that was on the up part of the actual squat itself. I think that became an issue because I wasn't locking everything in as tight as it needed to be. So if my elbows are tucked in and my shoulders are pulled back, I've got that shelf built already. That issue sort of started going away as I became better at that.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, it's just lock it in, turn back and see if you've got whites or not.
Yeah.
You know?
Where do you feel the tension on the way down? Muscularly.
For me, it's probably hips.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like it's like if I'm in the right position where I need to be, I probably feel it the most in my hips and sort of the like lower part of my back a little bit.
Yeah. So if you're starting and you feel like your quads, you're going to shift back.
Yep. If I'm on my quads, you can tell instantly, right? And typically, I can tell also after a big squat if I was too far forward because my calves would hurt. My calves are real sore. And I've actually had a couple like real minor like calf tears because of that. Like, you know, you know what, dummy, you're not sitting back on your heels very well, you know. And a trick that I don't remember who told me this or whatever, but again, when I'm squatting, I keep trying my best to keep my toes off the ground, right? So if I'm in my chucks and my toes aren't touching the ground, I can't get on them, right? So it's little tiny cues like that I learned from day one that I still have to practice and still have to do every single time in order to make it feel right.
Mm-hmm. Now, for to go through the bench, how would you explain that if it's the single ply shirt?
Single ply stuff. So typically for me, like it's obviously with like the single ply poly, I don't have a hard time getting out, holding the bar wherever I need to go. So I'm setting up. I typically do bench with my feet back if I can, depending on the rules and stuff like that too. So feet are also, feet are where they need to be. Sitting on the bench, feet are where they need to be. Laying back down, resetting my feet again, and then driving myself again, like from further back to under the bar. I would say as I've benched more and more, I probably set up a little closer to the back part of the bench so I don't have to kind of pop it out and get it ready to go. And for me, it's a big part is getting up on top of my lats, squeezing everything really just back as hard as I can, right? So I feel like that really when I'm right here, I can just kind of flare and get the bar out, right? It helps me, helps the spotters, helps everything. And then as far as descent goes, I know some guys will do a lot of they'll tuck coming down touch and kind of flare out. For me, what always felt better is just consciously tuck as hard as I can the whole time. I know that's maybe just because I have short arms, whatever, I don't really know. But if I'm consciously thinking about tucking the entire time, I'm going to touch where I need to go, and I'm going to fire my triceps so hard that it's going to get through that, or it's going to get through that part without really having to really worry too much about this aspect of it. That's what works best for me typically. And again, you got to find what works for you too.
Yeah.
There's a whole aspect of that just practice and trialing different things, but that's what feels best for me.
How's that change if it's a band shirt?
So funny you say that because I was talking to Jimmy about this, and because I felt like I was touching too high. I felt like in order to touch, I felt like I had to flare my elbows out real and pull everything back. It just did not feel right. And talking with him, he's and obviously he's the best at it. He said that there was a point in time when he just kind of forgot about what everyone was like suggesting to do in the shirt and just bench like you would in just a regular poly. Like whatever works best for you in the poly, do that in the band. And that worked for him. So I was like, okay, let's try it. Worked for me too. So even though it is a different bench press as far as like what it feels like, the weight on the bar, maybe a little bit as far as where you're touching, the movement's still pretty much the same, right? So if you're good at a certain movement and a certain technique, try that first with the other bandage stuff. More than likely, that's going to be the technique that works best for you. It like again, we kind of keep coming back to the same point. Like you don't want to start over and learn something else if you're pretty good at something already. So after trying that, it did help a lot, helped a ton. So,
all right, so then the deadlift.
Yank on it, hope for the best.
Yes.
No, so I've been,
well, as you've gotten wider, as you've gotten wider, your grip has to go out. This is something I see a lot of bigger lifters don't do is they're so used to having a certain grip because they've used it that the whole time, but now they get wider and now they're in a position they can't bring their shoulders back or their hips through.
And it took a long time for me to finally figure that out. Like I felt like I could have been a year ahead if I would have just changed some things. You know what I mean? You got to be flexible. But yeah, I'm not a great deadlifter, but I've been pulling more conventional lately. And that is because as my upper body and back has been wider, and then you have the suit, it's tough getting on the bar, right? So especially with the sumo, when you're fighting to get down to the bar and then pulling all that back in, I've struggled. Whereas if with conventional, I'm able to kind of bend at the waist, get the bar out where I need it to be, take the time to get my hand set, and then roll it back and pull. So again, same as everything else, as far as like drop the hips, get your head up. My thing is trying to do it as efficient as possible, because just the pressure of gripping onto the bar, pulling it back, and not getting that breath up top, and not being able to breathe till you put the bar down, basically. That's been one thing I've been really trying to work on over the past couple of years, is just being more efficient at the setup of the deadlift to make the actual movement be a lot smoother. And typically a smoother movement is also quicker for me.
Yeah. Well, the setup's different for you too, because you're 350 pounds.
Yeah.
So
absolutely,
you can't spend a lot of time down. It's impossible to spend a lot of time down there.
Yeah. You pretty much just got to like be accurate, be efficient, go, right? And even as simple as like aiming for the bar, right? As far as where your hands are gripping, you don't have to grip it twice, right? Get your hands there right the first time. Pull it all in, yank it, make it efficient, right? There is a certain, obviously, like explosiveness factor with the deadlift, especially, that you have to be able to do too. And in order to be successful at that, the more efficient setup helps with that. You know what I mean?
Well, how do you manage that with the different bars that are there? Because I would assume the way that you pull, there won't be that much difference between, a regular 45-pound bar and, a kabuki bar per se.
There really isn't a whole lot different.
No, but it can screw you up bad.
But it does, yeah.
If you try to pull fast with.
Yep. So the big thing is like the movement is pretty much the same, right?
Yeah.
But the actual rolling the bar back and getting it set up, like, especially if I'm using a kabuki or something more of a deadlift bar, I need to be sure that my hips are down before I take off, right? If I'm using a more of a stiffer style bar, they're easier to muscle typically. You know what I mean? So, but that's not the proper way to lift it either, right? So, I guess using a more of a whippier bar, like I try to mentally slow things down a little bit and just be sure that my hips are where they need to be before the bar comes off the ground. Yeah. That's the biggest thing for me personally. A lot of times, because as the bar's coming back, I'll just take off. Well, if you take off that far too soon, you may or may not get at the top, right? So, especially with the leverages that I have. So,
you haven't had any major surgery type injuries?
No, not really. I've like torn pretty much everything, but nothing no full ruptures. I got my pecs are all weird shaped and stuff like that too, but nothing to the point where I didn't feel like that I couldn't rehab it. My wife being a physical therapist helps a lot too, because she sees a lot of the stuff and she sees typically within the industry what people are fixing versus what people.
All right, guys, you like the podcast, but maybe you're a little tired of all the interruptions. We set up a YouTube membership. You'll get extra content, and it's all ad-free. Join today.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Are we done selling this?
I'm done. All right. Guys, this is the new elitefts.com box squat box. It weighs 73 pounds, I'm told.
It weighs 3 pounds.
You've got your story, I've got mine. He says 3, I say 73. This is absolutely amazing, guys, no joke. You can box squat on this. I'm gonna box squat it tomorrow. This sucker is strong, ridiculously strong, And it is light, guys. No joke. You can carry this anywhere, put this in your gym. Anybody can use this. It's extremely affordable as well. I really can't believe it. So I'm sure they're going to tell you all the details down below or the side or somewhere. But this thing is absolutely amazing. 73 pounds, guys. 73 pounds.
Aren't fixing it, just working around. You know, in general, I think a lot of folks are probably a little too quick to go under the knife. There's a lot of things that powerlifters have been able to do, you know, by rehabbing injury versus getting cut up and, you know, fixing it that way.
How do you go about navigating training around or through or not at all movements?
So I definitely do. Like a train through injuries. May or may not be the right thing to do, but I definitely do that. The biggest thing for me is, like, you know, if I have an issue where, you know, I tore some hamstrings a couple years ago, like back to back, like did them like, you know, pretty quickly. So deadlift really wasn't a great, regular competition style deadlift wasn't a great option for me, right? I was pulling conventional too, so like that's, you know, a lot of strain on the hamstrings as well. So even if it just meant that I had to pull sumo from like a high pin pull where the hamstrings were kind of over and I could just start engaging the hips and engaging the back and keep that movement going, I would still do that. And that would allow me to still train fairly heavily, but also not aggravate my you know, torn hamstrings and whatnot. You know, utilizing equipment like a belt squat and things like that's very important as well. If you can't do the movement, that's okay. Find something else. You know, I think there's a lot of like, if you're injured, well, I won't do this for a month. That's not necessarily a good thing either, right? You need to keep that mobility. You need to keep movement. Bev's always telling me, like, you know, especially after I tweak something, like, keep it moving. Like, don't just sit there and let it tighten up, right? Move it, use it, be smart about it, but use it, and use those therapies like dry needling and things like that that are a little more unconventional to say traditional powerlifters if they work. You know, just be smarter. You know, train smart.
So if we're looking at the 12 weeks before the meet, and then if it's competing once a year, all the other time, you know, throughout the rest of the year, the training doesn't change that much. The loads may.
Loads may, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And during that, because I've always said that where most lifters, and I'd say bodybuilders as well, screw up is they have an overimportance on their prep and an underimportance on what they would call an off season.
Agreed.
The whole prep thing is still kind of funny to me because we never used to use words like prep. I mean, you were just a powerlifter. You competed once or twice a year.
You signed up for me.
It's like it's always prep, right? And now there's like prep and off season, all this weird shit. With the goal to be able to get to that 12-week point as healthy as you possibly can. Yeah. Because you know from that 12 weeks going in, you're not going to get healthier.
No.
It's only going to disintegrate. It's only
worse.
Right. And the goal is the health. I've always said the healthiest person, all things being relatively equal, will always win.
Usually.
Right. And as a super, I'd say relatively equal is probably 200 pounds on the total plus or minus.
Yeah.
Right.
Easily. Yeah.
You know, the difference between you guys between a first and a second, and say you don't take the third, that can be 150 pounds on the squat.
Absolutely.
So now you got a shitty squat, and the healthier person doesn't need to squat 1150.
Yeah.
You know, they can squat, if you're going to make a mistake like that, a grand and still end up beating you if everything else is good.
Agreed.
So how healthy you start makes a big,
very important.
It's just very important.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, come 5 weeks out, the shit ain't healthy anymore. Right. And you talk to the people at a meet and it's always fun. Everybody's fucked up. Right.
Yes.
You know, so you can almost gauge
the guys who feel fantastic.
They're screwed.
Yeah. Yes, 100%.
They're screwed.
If no one's complaining about something, there's something wrong. Usually.
Exactly. So for that off season period, that's also when you want to bring up the work capacity, your base, and all that other stuff.
Yep.
What other things do you focus on during that time period? Because it's also a time period you can chill a little bit because you don't have the stress of there's a meet coming up in 12 weeks either.
I you know, obviously doing lots of fives and things like that, but I do also take the time to do some movements that are fun. Do you know what I mean? Like if you like, I don't do a ton of like say like super heavy board work with like a 2-ply Widowmaker or whatever. But I find that kind of fun sometimes, right? You just throw it on and hit something monstrous, right?
Yeah.
It's fun, right?
Yeah.
Do it.
Yeah.
If it's fun, do it. You know what I mean?
4-board reverse band.
Yeah. Yeah. Load like 1800 up on it or whatever. Do something fun, right? So I think a lot of people sometimes after their after meet, though, you know, you hear of like people, I never really got this necessarily, but you hear of people that have this almost like post meet like depression almost, right? Do some fun stuff, man. Like, you know, we all got into this because we enjoy lifting weights, right? So go back to that. You know, you can do fun things in the gym and still get stronger. You know what I mean? Like there's, you know, there are it's not only the lifts that feel punishing and our punishment are the ones that make you better. Some of the heavy fun stuff is good too. You know what I mean? So especially the first 4 weeks after meet, especially, like pick some of those lifts you haven't done for a while that you really enjoy doing, but really don't fit into your prep. Take the time and do those. You know, have some fun with it. You know, it's pretty simple.
The only thing I would stack on top of that, if we're talking those 4 weeks, is pick movements that are almost virtually impossible to get hurt on.
Yes.
Right. Because most of the dumbest injuries I've ever seen were post meet.
You're already compromised.
Yes.
So take the time to get healthy, get right, but have a little bit of fun with it too.
Yeah.
You know, and if you don't have a meet for quite a while, like say if you're 6 months out or something or whatever, and you want to take another 4 weeks of doing some of the fun stuff, that's okay. That's fine. You know, you don't always have to be in a meet prep. That's hard for me because I'm very black and white. So like I'm a mechanical engineer. I'm, you know, very black and white. It's this way or that way. It's all about numbers. Like that's hard. That's been really hard for me. You know what I mean? To kind of like to go off script a little bit. You know what I mean?
Is there one of the things when I got to West Side with Louie is, you know, obviously training completely changed from everything I was doing before all that. And you had a rule that you don't want your strength to fall under 90%. And we have all these max effort exercises. So it's easy to gauge, you know, here, oh shit, it's 85%. And then the training would have to change to get it back. And I don't want to say we just wanted to maintain that 90%, but the 90% was okay. That was okay because we're working on all these other things that are more important during that time period. And then that's enough to when you start really getting ready for that meet.
You gotta flip the switch.
You can make that deficit back really quick. Is there a percent? Do you operate kind of from that mindset?
I do. So like if I'm doing lots of you know, again, there's kind of maxes for everything. Right?
Yeah.
If I'm doing like 5s and things like that, my 80% is kind of like the like 5 rep range. I'm doing like multiple sets in or whatever. But you know, when it comes to that, when it comes to the actual like competition numbers, 90% is really close. I think it's like I didn't necessarily mean it to be 90%, but that's kind of a rule of thumb as far as like a lot of folks go. And I also look at it from attempts, right? So what's my first attempt kind of number needing to be in order for me to get that second attempt number that I want. Third attempt is usually icing on the cake or take it again. You know what I mean? So I look at that from which ends up being 90%. I look at it more so in that realm. Like I should be able to take my opener any week of the year pretty much. Right? But looking at it from that perspective, like that's kind of the number I need to stay around. I can dial in that extra 100 pounds if I need to or whatever, you know.
And then with the accessory work that you're doing, how do you lean into that during that off-season time period? Because there's not going to be as much systemic stress on the main thing. Right? So does that increase in frequency volume when the frequency is not going to change, but load? Are you trying to push different things?
I do try to push load a little bit more as far as the accessory movements in the what I'll call off season, which again I don't really have off seasons. You know what I mean? But like if I don't be coming up, I will push more of that accessory kind of work volume. And then, you know, if I'm not in say a shirt every week on that Friday night, on Tuesday I'll jump into my Widowmaker. I'll do some heavy volume with it. You know what I mean? Something that will allow me to really burn the triceps up, get something feeling heavy in my hands. It may not be like a maximal load, obviously, but more of that sort of movements, right? I really work a lot on like adding volume to my upper back accessories. I want to get as thick as possible, right, and keep that size, and if I get any bigger, get bigger, right? So I do definitely push more of that.
So what are you training for now? I mean, what is the next meet that you have?
So the next full meet that I'm planning on is February 1st. It's actually it's another meet ran by Chris Jivden down in West Virginia. It's an IPA meet. I'm basically sitting like almost 24 weeks out, so it's quite a ways. But what I've done, I've sort of split it up into 2 12-week blocks and allowed for some time in between to recover and then start that prep again.
Now, I'm assuming based upon the last meet, and I don't want to say anything that's going to like jinx you. Are you looking to squat what I think you're looking to squat?
Absolutely. That's the goal.
Yeah, right. So it's,
for sure.
So health is a huge focus right now.
It is a very big focus.
Yeah, it's the hip health and all that kind of stuff.
For sure, yeah.
So how has this off season been different than say your last one?
I have actually taken a little more time. Not pushing heavy, like full equipment loads. I've done quite a bit of like heavy brief stuff and things like that, but I've tried to stay away, at least to an extent, some of the heavier full equipment stuff. Even like this is gonna sound really dumb, but I've even gone as far as like change what kind of shoes I'm wearing every day, right? Like I work on concrete a lot, right? So
Yeah.
on the floor, stuff like things like that. What little things can I do in my everyday life that will make my back and hip health better? So when I do start that prep, I'm ready to rock and roll. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So little things, trying to take my nutrition more seriously. I know it doesn't look like it, but trying to stay better hydrated, trying to, rest as much as I need to rest and whatnot. Like, just being more conscious of those things. I think that's the biggest difference between going into this prep versus previous preps. Just trying to be smarter.
So at this point, everything matters.
Everything matters. There's nothing off limits. Everything matters. Yeah. Like every little thing can make a bigger difference than you will ever know. So I don't want to leave any stone unturned.
All right. So when you look at laying the numbers out for that 12-week thing, and I saw the video of your squat, right? And I'm not under the bar, obviously, but I watched that one and I watch all the other ones, and you never know if you're one of those people that you throw 20 more pounds on and you miss, even though it looked like there was 40 more.
Yeah.
But with that in mind, it only looks like you need to get 20 pounds stronger. Right. Yeah. Because that's just how this sport operates.
For sure. Yeah.
And the reason I point this out though, is because sometimes you'll have a lifter go to a meet, say they just third attempt, 700, they smoke it, everybody around them. They're not one of these people that 10 more pounds is going to crush them. Yeah. They're like, that's 760, 780. Yeah. But then they'll go and they'll plan their program at that 780. And meanwhile, I'm thinking, you stupid idiot, just program it the same way that you just did and get the 780.
Yes.
Less accumulated damage and all the other stuff.
Agreed, yeah.
So how are you laying the numbers out? Are you laying it out heavier than it was before, or kind of where it was, but just being heavier, or have the stronger intent at the bottom? It's laid out pretty similarly. This person laid out pretty similarly. I would say one of the differences that I'm looking at is even on my warm-ups, like how can I make that a little more efficient? And then as far as my opener, getting my opener to not much higher, but a little higher to where that second jump really doesn't feel like a huge number. You know what I mean? And that's also why I've kind of tweaked my openers, my warm-ups a little bit as well. But it feels like the way that if everything goes okay, the way the squats have been feeling, like I think that number is there. And I think that number probably would have been there last time if I would have had a different number in mind. You know what I mean? So I haven't tried to change a whole lot. I don't think there's a lot of benefit to like you said, putting yourself under those additional loads if they're just not necessary, because the number's already there. You know what I mean? Yeah. Well, that's what I wanted you to say, right? Because I'm sure you see the same thing that I'm talking about all the time. Yeah. But usually what happens when they make that what they think is a correction, their next meet is a disaster because they pretty much overreached that entire time.
Yeah.
Then they end up squatting.
The strength was already there.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
They just, they need to work. And that's where the technique that you were talking about, the intent, the sport is about displaying your strength.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and that's what happens when a beginner comes into a crew is maybe they got a real shitty looking 455 squat or something like that.
Yeah. And
you just fix their technique and they squat 600 in 2 weeks. They didn't get stronger. No. They just displayed the strength they already had more efficiently.
Absolutely.
And that's the game.
And that doesn't change.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Regardless of what level you're at, like there is something we all can do to fix something, make something more efficient. And at that point, if say 1160 versus 1180, 1200, it's going to feel the same.
Yes.
You know what I mean? What can I do to be just a little more efficient about it? You know,
well, the best way to validate that is anybody that's an experienced lifter that's been around for a long time has always had the squat where their hips came up a little bit sooner than what they should compared to the chest.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what should have been easy ended up being a grind.
Yeah.
Right.
Way harder.
Still the same weight.
And you're still just
the same lift. Still just as strong, but it was way different.
100%.
But lifters have a hard time conceptualizing that in the inverse.
Yeah.
Like, well, what if your entire lift is like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you just haven't figured out how to make it more efficient yet.
Yeah.
There's one thing that you're just not doing.
And just thinking about it logically, like, okay, so you have, 1,000 pounds on the bar or whatever, and you put you want a 50-pound PR. Take that plate, compare it to the rest of the bar, right? Like, it's not a whole lot more. You just got to be more efficient about it. And some of our younger lifters too, like, say they want to, so we have some like great female lifters at the gym. They're up and coming. Say they want to squat 300 pounds for the first time, but they've been, the most they ever squatted was like 280. Just give them 210s. Like, hey, this is all that's left. You can do that. If this was on the bar last time you took it, it would have still went. And just getting that mentality, that mindset, and understanding that it is just a number, and you're not 20 pounds stronger necessarily. You're just more efficient.
I got down here life outside of powerlifting, so we kind of touched on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Where do you? I'm going to reframe some of these things to. You have a small crew, so I don't want examples of your crew, right? But people outside of your crew that you've seen, where do you see some of the bigger mistakes that they're making? In that we kind of talked about hobbies as well, but just in the whole sport entirely.
Yeah, I think going back a little bit to the extreme, I'm going to call it extreme individualism that every lifter feels like that they need to have in order to be successful. There is not one program that's going to fix everything. There is not a certain exercise that's going to fix everything. You're going to typically get more out of training with a group of like-minded people and embracing that concept and feeding off each other's energies versus, and this is, I'm not saying this isn't a tool to use, but typically you're going to get more benefit out of that versus an individualized program that forces you, that's so off the wall that it forces you to do your own movements. Like, for example, like there are some people that that I've seen in the past, like, well, I can't squat with you guys because you guys use a 55-pound bar and I use a 45-pound bar, or I can't squat with you guys because you guys use pound plates versus kilo plates. It don't matter. You know what I mean? Like, you see some of that in some of our newer lifters in general. Like, weight's weight, adapt, right? It's cool to have it on that piece of paper. Tweak it a little bit if that means you can train with a group. You know what I mean? You don't have to throw it all away. Just tweak it a little bit. And you're going to get more out of that. That's the biggest thing. And I think that's probably been the biggest thing over the past, I think, 5 to 10 years. Where, like, that's one of the things that maybe social media has hindered. Most of it has helped tremendously, helped the sport tremendously. That's one small area I think that may have hindered, because they see somebody doing these specific movements, or a coach offering this specific program, and, well, in order to be successful, I have to do this. That's just not the case.
Well, I think there's and maybe overstating this because I bring it up so much, is if, say it's Instagram or any social media and you're watching a lifter that you want to aspire to be like, typically what you're seeing is everything that if they walk it out, you're not even seeing the walk out. You're you're just seeing the actual squat. So you're seeing 6 to 8 seconds, of that training day.
Yeah.
Maybe if they post either way, if they post multiple clips, you might be getting 40 seconds of the training day, but they're not seeing how they approach the bar. They're not seeing how they set up the bar. They're not even seeing how they rack the bar.
No.
They're not seeing what they do between sets. They're not seeing, there's a lot of intangibles.
For sure.
That when you add up all those intangibles, I would argue it's more important than what you actually did see.
I agree with that.
Right?
Yeah,
because
I agree with that.
Without that, then that lift doesn't happen. Extreme example, you're taking 45 seconds rest between every warm-up set and the top set, and that's the top set. So, I mean, it never happens, but that's an extreme example of all that. But you don't see, and it would be boring, for somebody to webcam their entire training program. For sure. Because the only thing that really people want to see is that other thing. Yeah. But you miss out on all those other things that even if you're in the gym but you're not training with said people, you're still part of that social dynamic. For sure. That's going to have influence on that person. Yep.
And it will make you better.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. Like you will feed off other folks' energy and knowledge and critiques and everything like that. It will make you better. Isolating yourself on an island is typically not the best decision for most people. Yes. Some people make it work, and some people are very successful at it. For the majority of people, it's going to be better to really embrace that crew mentality.
Yeah, and I'd also put out there that they should lock in whatever their goal is.
Yes.
Tight. Right, and so if it is to bench a certain weight, squat a certain weight, whatever it's going to be, they need to make that more important because we're all influenced.
Oh, absolutely.
So, I mean, we can flip through shit and you see some exercise you haven't seen in like 5 or 6 years.
We'll try that.
You're like, man, and even if you should, it's still, you're like, man, I haven't done that forever.
For sure. Yeah.
But if you're really you're really locked in, like, man, I'm 6 weeks out, this is a cool ass thing. Maybe I'll do it. You'll forget, by the way, but maybe I'll do it in the off season. That only gets avoided because you're so locked into what that main thing is.
Yes.
If you're not locked into whatever that main thing that you're training for is, then you're going to be doing all those different things because we're all susceptible to, hey, that looks cool.
Yeah.
Right. And it doesn't need to be a meet, like whatever, whatever phase of training you're in now, before that phase ends and leads to the next one, there's still indicators that you're trying to achieve.
For sure.
Before you go into the next month or whatever it's going to be. They're all tangible indicators to be marked off. That's where I think they have more of an issue.
Agreed.
With that. Now that can be kind of hacked because I mean, if you're in a crew, you're going to default to somebody else's indicators. Right. Which,
for sure.
And that's okay because that will work because, for most people, as you were saying, just doing it, consistently with the right environment, you're going to get stronger no matter. It can be the worst program in the world. For sure. You're going to get stronger.
That's the other aspect too, as far as like other exercises and stuff, like the equipment that you use, right? If you are using a certain piece of equipment and it's worked well for you in the past, like master it, perfect it, get really good at it.
That's a big one.
You see of guys that will, they switch stuff around so much.
I've totally forgot about that one. I'm so disconnected with that part because I'm around people that have been using the same shit for 10 years.
Yeah.
But that's a big one.
For sure.
They'll try a shirt twice. This is a piece of shit.
Yeah.
Like, well, maybe it's not.
It's like, hey, it's not broken in. It doesn't fit the way it's going to fit when you're at a contest. Like, take some time and figure it out. Like you may be leaving a lot on the table by just laying to the wayside.
Yeah. That was one thing that I really learned when we were a distributor for metal because I sponsor lifters. And then part of that was you have to use this. Yeah. And they're coming from other gear and they're getting big carryovers over the other gear and they really don't want to use that. Right.
For sure.
And in some cases it may not have been the best choice, bench shirt wise, especially. And, but with every one of them over a 12-month period of time, they're all breaking records again. And then they got even better. And I started like, is this the gear that much better? And it's just what you're talking about. It forced them to no longer change.
Yeah. Like they were dialed in, they were locked in on specific, and they got really good at it.
Yes. And they then learned how to alter it, where to take things in, where to let things out. But it took away that other option of, okay, just dump this, go here, just go here. And man, that for gear lifting, some people never get out of that.
Yeah. I see it all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they have no idea how much better they would
there's
be.
not, there's not a specific piece of equipment that they've perfected to really understand their true potential. Because they're always starting over. Like you know how bad it sucks breaking equipment and starting. Imagine doing that like once every couple months. Like who wants to do that? You know what I mean? Get good at it, use it, work it. Make it work for you.
Well, you get a big enough crew, then you give all the new shit to the new guys.
Exactly.
Let them break it in because they think new stuff's better.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then you take it back when the next new stuff comes in.
It's perfect.
They break it in.
That's how it works.
Yeah, I mean, all my best lifts were done in somebody else's gear.
It's funny that happens.
almost every single time.
That's awesome.
Were there any topics that you wanted to go over I didn't bring up?
I was thinking about this on the ride down. I think you've touched everything.
Philosophy, simplest, mentorship, work ethic. Well, I guess we can kind of get into this work ethic a little bit, because that we kind of touched on it.
Yeah.
As you come up, it's how you're going to define it needs to change. It's one of those weird things like the hardest you've ever worked is the hardest you've ever worked.
Yes.
That may be pale in comparison to what somebody else's hard work is.
Yeah.
So that becomes a weird thing,
I guess you have to be committed to be absolutely 100% committed to do the work, take the time and all that side together, the patience and everything, to achieve the goals that you previously stated, like being locked into those goals. You can be as locked into the goals as you want, but you have to also be committed to the time it's going to take to achieve those goals. There are certain things in life that, that we've all probably laid to the wayside to be a better powerlifter. And that may or may not be the right life choice, but it's a choice that we all made to achieve something, you know what I mean? And if you're serious about it, you're going to have to take the time and you're going to have to commit to that, and I'm not saying that's the right move for everybody, you know what I mean?
No, but that needs to be, we can go a little bit deeper in that one though, because it's the time doing the things that are going to actually make you better.
Yes.
Right. And sometimes, it's the longer that you're in there, that then becomes nutrition now has become a higher priority because everything else has been tapped. You know what I'm saying?
The last thing.
Yeah. So it's easy to tap the things you really wanted that you like.
Yeah. That's
like
fun.
training hard's easy, and
it's fun.
And when I was younger and training hard, I thought I was all in, but that's just one piece. Once you get through all this stuff and look at all the systemic things that feed into all this, it's training hard, the nutrition, the hydration, the recovery, the rest, just your general life stress, is your life a fucking mess, and all those while you're younger, almost like a badge of honor. Like I'm a real powerlifter because my life is a fucking disaster, and I'm I'm purple. I eat like shit. I'm not recovering. I can't walk from here to there. And I've
paid my dues, right?
Yeah, and that's what you think.
Yeah.
But the longer that you're in it, you realize I really wasn't paying my dues at all because I was only doing the things I really liked to do. I wasn't doing the things I had to do to get better. There was a lot
of low hanging fruit that you just walk right by.
Yeah, and I think you got to live through it to really understand all that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But as that goes through, that definition of work ethic completely changes.
It does.
Because the easiest thing to do is what you do in the gym. All the other things.
It's the thing that's the most fun too. I mean, like it's the, it's not as fun to clean up the diet or hydrate better, or no, I'm going to bed early and missing out on this because I got this coming up or whatever. It's, when we're younger, you could go to bed at 2 a.m., wake up at, whatever, 7 or 8, go train and kill it, right? That's not the way it's going to happen anymore, plain simple.
Yeah. Any final thoughts for an intermediate lifter.
Mhm.
So we're not talking beginner.
Yeah.
We're talking an intermediate that's trying to get to that next level.
I would say the biggest thing is that like be 100% committed to what you're currently working on, to your goals that you had talked about. Understand that even though you're an intermediate lifter, there you may still have 10, 15 more years of improvement that you need to be thinking about. You know, if you're an intermediate lifter and you're and you make progress for say 5 years and it stales out because of life and everything else and whatever, you've left 10 years on the table where 10 years on the table where you like could have been getting better. You know what I mean? So be conscious of that, thinking about how you can prolong your career, because you're going to be the strongest you know, at your peak, right? You know,
Mhm.
that's going to, and if you peak properly, it's going to be later on during the career. So just be committed to like taking that time. Also, you know, search out those individuals that are like-minded to you, and feed off of that. You know, if you want to, you know, bounce ideas off each other, just don't get so wrapped up in like, I need to be extremely individual in my training, and like, it's okay to ask somebody else what they think. It's okay to try stuff that you see the next guy doing that's working for him. You know, really focus on like on embracing that whole crew mentality. And if you, and I know that's not an option for everybody, if you don't have that option, um you know, Dave, you were one of the first guys to really put powerlifting
Mhm.
out there, right? I remember sitting in college classes reading training logs when I should have been paying attention. So thanks for that.
Yeah. Well, you still got through.
But you know, just learn as much as you can, right? Don't sell yourself short because you're unwilling to learn something.
Well, I think that if just to say what you were, just to circle back to what you just said, if you see somebody doing something, ask them why they're doing that. They can still do that online, right?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
they can
100%.
I mean, they're looking at top lifters, you know, for ideas, influence, education, and all that.
Yeah.
They can also look for intermediate lifters that they're in the same
100%.
level that they are.
Yeah.
Follow them,
Yep.
and then if you see them doing something, you know, DM them. Most top lifters are going to reply too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But if you can have that relationship with lifters at the same level, and then communicate with them via DM, text, or whatever the hell you're going to use, you know, then you can bounce those ideas off,
for sure.
right?
Like, you're going to go to a meet, and the guy that beat you, become his friend.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, start following them, like build a relationship, and that will go a really long way.
That'll go further than what I think people.
I agree 100%.
Because they're going through the same things.
Yeah.
You know, and
don't
that's
be the
huge.
guy that gets ticked off, skips the award ceremony, and just walks out.
Yeah.
Right? Like, go talk to that guy.
Yeah.
You might learn something from him.
Well, you should always have somebody that you're aspiring and learning from that's better than you are.
100%.
Right. And then you should always have
Absolutely.
people at your same level that you're going to compete against.
Yes.
Right. And then people
Yeah.
that are at a level lower that you can help teach and coach,
For sure.
because that's going to make you
It's gonna
move
make
up.
you better,
So all three are necessary in any
Yes.
crew, by the way.
I agree.
But
Yeah.
I would say that's true in anything in life. If it's what you do at work, there's going to be people above you that know more that you're trying to learn from, that are mentoring you.
Yeah.
There's people that come in that unfortunately you have to train.
Yeah.
You know, that's just
part of it.
but it's just part of it. But it's part of overall making you a better human.
That's better for the company. It's better for powerlifting, right? Like,
Yeah.
we all want the sport to grow and to be successful. Like do your part as well.
Yeah.
You know.
How can people go about finding you?
So I'm on Instagram and Facebook, Tyler Butcher. I'm sponsored by Anderson Powerlifting, so I'm on their website as well. And again, like kind of like what you said, like, you know, I have people DM me quite a bit about questions and stuff, and I may not know, and if I don't know, I'll tell you. But like, yeah, I'm always open to try to help somebody.
Yeah.
I don't consider myself a coach necessarily, but like, I've got no problem telling you what worked for me, and at the same time, I might be able to learn something from you. You know?
All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming out.
Absolutely.
Been great sitting down.
Had a great time talking to you.
All right, guys, we're done. All right, guys, thanks for watching the video to the end. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and click here, or here for more videos.